24-hour free video on demand of all parliamentary sittings and committee meetings. You can rewind, pause, or go to a specific contribution whenever you want, from your home, office, or on the go. Log on now to ParlView at parlview.ttparliament.org.
The Honourable the Vice President.
Honourable Minister of Works and Transport.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, as I said before, this bill it's a very important bill, but it's a straightforward bill where we amend the two clauses. And I just want to continue from where I left off with Senator Ramdeen, that he spoke about the acquiring a driver's permit, and there's no checks and balances after a certain, I don't think he was quite correct, because there is a requirement after a certain age of an individual that you have to get a medical, which includes an eye test and things like that. It might be important that probably revisit it, say after 10 years that you should, because you don't have to be over a certain age to have eye problems. I think I have eye problems, so. The way we get our driver's permit. Mr. Vice President, this is something that the Ministry of Works is looking at very seriously, because we do have a lot of complaints that people get driver's permit at the licensing office without having to undergo certain tests. It's alleged that people can actually buy their permits. And as I said, as I said in another place recently, part of this proceeds, we understand some of the driving schools, it starts there. So the Ministry of Works with the license office, we are looking at the way in which people acquire driver's permit, because with everything in place, speed limit, speed gun, everything, if people on the road who are not trained to be on the road, I don't think they will understand what we're trying to do. So we are looking at the way people get their driver's permit. And I just want to say that indiscipline on the road is much worse than speed. Because in some countries, roads that have no speed limit have the least amount of accidents. But indiscipline is what causes carnage on the road. Senator Richards, you spoke about the balance. Well, in order to arrive at the 100 kilometers per hour, Senator Richards, several things were taken into consideration. What the technocrats had to do is basically find the desired speed. And how you found the desired speed is really the posted speed. And in most instances, the speed that commuters might have been comfortable at, taking into consideration the pedestrians on the road and the design of the highway. As I said before, our highways were built for 110 kilometers, and where we are at is 100. So we are within that framework, and it was not something that just jumped out of a hat. I can tell you, I was trying to get this bill here since February of this year. But the cabinet, led by the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, sent me back 3 times. They go and draft all the roads, all the interchange. We had to actually peruse all the interchange, and that is why the speed limit is just not simply 100 in some areas and 80 in other areas. If you look at the entire spread, it's down to 30 on interchange. Some areas, I think it's 25, 40. So it was a holistic approach to all the roads that we took into consideration before we came up with this speed limit. It was not something just taken out of the hat. I must say that since 2012, they have been gathering information before they took this decision now. So just to put that to rest, that we did follow all precautions before we did this. We are at the ministry again, looking at all the improvements on the road. Senator Ramdin spoke about the traffic lights. Yes, there's a problem with street lights in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a problem with dark spots where we have continuous accidents, and so all those things were taken into consideration. That is one of the areas that we looked at before we decided where we're going to put the spot speed cameras and some of the red lights cameras. They looked at the intersection that were most vulnerable. So as to the road improvement, and so I must say, Mr. Vice President, that the highways in Trinidad and Tobago have improved significantly from since 1976, when this speed limit law started. We now have 4-lane highways. We have highways in Tobago, the Claude Noel Highway, which was, what, 50 kilometers recently. That has now gone up to 80 under this new improvement. So we would have taken all that into consideration. The billboards, Senator Richards, I have recently signed the notice to remove all the billboards on the road reserves, all. And for those that are not on the reserve, I know the town, and we have wrote the Town and Country Planning Division to visit those, because there is a problem with these bright billboards, and they might be on commercial buildings, and so we do not have jurisdiction over that. But I have recently, I think it was close to about 300 billboards that we have asked the owners to take down on the road reserve. The whole education before the new laws come into place, the communication department at the ministry is also looking at that. We are looking at the ministry social media, and we will be doing a campaign, because signage is important. At least it's a part of the requirement of the law. You can't just change the speed limit without properly putting signs on the highways, and so that is something that we're looking at. You spoke about the public transportation. Again, that is something that we're looking at. The PTSC has a mandate to get their service up to some standard, and that is why this year, in this fiscal year, they'll be taking possession of, I think, 65 new buses. But 65 new buses would not solve the problem. The problem with PTSC is much more than that. It's a whole culture change in PTSC. And working with the Maxi Taxi, the advisory committee, and I know they met just about 2 weeks ago with the new, in the 2017-2018 budget, the Minister of Finance spoke about the Maxi Taxi Association and certain new aspects of it. The conversation so far has been to look at routes that are not manned by maxi taxis. The association have put that forward. We are in consultation with them, and through the PTSC and the Maxi Taxi Association, I am sure very soon we will have all these routes that are not serviced in a much better position, especially the new housing developments, and so that PTSC buses cannot regularly service. The idea is that maxi taxis will be able to service these areas and bring them to a certain point.
If you give way.
Sure.
Is PTSC looking at developing an app to provide information and reliability of service?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Yes, the answer to that is yes. I have mandated PTSC to come up with a map. They have GPS on most of the buses. I don't see why any member of the traveling public cannot use a phone wherever they are and see exactly where the 6 o'clock bus is, the distance of the 6 o'clock bus. And if you know, look, something is wrong, then you can probably cross the stand, go to the priority bus route, take a maxi taxi, or go to a hub and take a taxi. Yes, PTSC looking at an app. And very, very soon, I hope that they can launch that app where the traveling public could have much more information about PTSC. Hubs. Again, if we have a proper public transportation system, hubs are very important. And I'd like to announce that in Arima, we are looking at an area where we could put a maxi hub, because one of the problems in Arima is that every street there's a maxi stand. And I don't think that is really productive for Arima. So we are looking at a maxi stand. Mr. Vice President, since the introduction of the speed guns, there have been over 1,800 speeding tickets in Trinidad and Tobago. What that told us clearly is that we could be very disciplined in Trinidad once we have enforcement. Prior to that, the survey was done, and what we found is that the average speed on the highway was 120 kilometers per hour. 120 is bad. Can you just say that? I mean, it's bad. It's above what the highway was built for. All right? And what the speed guns did is that it put the clamp on that. And it's coming out of that study that we realized we had to move the speed limit, because people were not comfortable driving at 80 miles per hour. I don't think it's a comfortable speed to drive at. That is why we came up with the 100 kilometers. The 80 kilometers is probably over 40 years old. And you could, I wouldn't have been around driving 40 years ago, but 40 years ago, most of the highways were just 2 lanes. It was basically just main roads, no shoulders or anything like that. The time has come to change that whole aspect of it, and this is where we are. The engineers at the Ministry of Works, they continue to collect data, because from time to time we may have to change the speed limit, and that is why the Act also allows the minister going forward, rather than coming and taking a whole day in the Parliament just to adjust the speed limit, the minister will have that prerogative. Mr. Vice President, an important part of it is the vehicles. The Attorney General would have said about the Bedford trucks. It is widely known that most of our citizens now, they go for the pickups, we call them the SUVs. These pickups that this Act will change and allow them to go up to the 100 kilometers, just like the regular vehicles. One of the aspects that we're looking at the Ministry of Works and Transport now is that the licensing of these vehicles, because most of them have to go to the license office for the inspection. And we are looking at the possibility of having them inspected at the inspection garages very soon, which will again bring some sort of relief for the owners of the vehicles. Mr. Vice President, some of the measures that we would have put in place with the introduction of this new speed limit would have been the procurement and the award of contracts for the installation of 25 zebra crossing. And I know Senator Roach isn't here, but one of the aspects of these is the height at which we put the buttons, the knobs for the crossing. It has to do with catering for the differently able in Trinidad and Tobago. So the Ministry of Works and Transport, whatever we're doing now, will pay special attention to the differently able in Trinidad and Tobago. Because we feel for too long we have designed buildings, we have done a lot of things without taking into consideration the differently able. And I can tell you, I was just looking at the design for the walkover, the ferry terminal. And one of the things that we insist that we put in is an elevator. And that is clearly for the use of the differently able. So whatever we're doing at the Ministry of Works, we will be taking that into consideration. We have also made provisions for 40 backup supply units at the traffic intersections. We all know what happens in Trinidad if you get a power outage. All the lights just had a blink. That is dangerous, and it creates a serious traffic backup. So one of our plans is to install these backup power supplies at all major traffic lights. This also will help the spot speed camera system. The provision of road studs on the highways and the main roads, again, safety measures, because you can't just go to 100 miles per hour and do look at safety. The use of the barrier system, I spoke about the cable barriers before. We are engaging the contractor to have all these barriers up and running. We have the increase in the road markings on the highway and the shoulders. I'm happy to say that in 2017, the ministry was able to accomplish over 70% of the markings in Trinidad and Tobago. Repaint the markings with the thermoplastic paint, which we expect that will last a lot longer than the regular road paint. The improvement of the dark spots with the use of caution signs, meaning there are certain areas, as Senator Ramdin said, that is prone to accidents. And I can tell you the M2 Ring Road, what we did recently is that we used where we mill the road. And since we milled the road, over 8 months ago, there were no accidents. And the reason for that is that once you hit that area, your car starts to bump. Now, that was a racetrack before. That was a racetrack. Since then, no accidents. On the Lady Young Road, have been milled recently. No accidents in those areas. So, and that doesn't cost the ministry any set of money. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. The securing the barriers. What we find is that the speed some people go at, when they hit these concrete barriers, they tend to move them. There have to be plenty speed to move these barriers. So what we're looking at is securing them down so that at least we could cushion that, and even the galvanized barriers by burying the ends of them. More public awareness and education about the use of roundabouts. I don't know, Mr. Vice President, a lot of people in Trinidad don't know how to use a roundabout. Sometimes you approach a roundabout and you know what this is, you're supposed to move, and then somebody just come flying around. You have the right of way, and then somebody just flies. There are a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago who don't know how to use a roundabout. And people take it for granted that, I remember growing up, you know that you keep on the left lane except when you're overtaken. That have been a thing of the past. Hopefully, with the new speed limits and so, we come back to basic in driving. At the Ministry of Work, we have the MEN program, where we expect the citizens will report any matters requiring attention, not specific just the potholes. Any infringement on the road, any violation that you see, if you see even traffic, the street lights, you can call MEN, and we will get onto the public utilities, because it is part of road safety. And the constant monitoring of the road surface and on the highway, we have mandated all the division heads to drive on the highways in their areas, because at 100 kilometers per hour, a pothole could be very dangerous. And we have a responsibility to ensure that we do exactly what is required of us. And the road surfacing is something that we pay specific attention to. When we launched MEND earlier this year, or it was December last year, we put 10 trucks on the road. We had 10 vehicles with the new system that we use on the road this year. We're going to put additional 10. So every division will have 2 trucks, and their job is just to go to the Agua Santa plant, or our own asphalt plant, collect the asphalt, and just go and patch potholes for the entire day in every district. Because we all know about the economic situation that we are in at this point in time. We cannot pave every road in the country. What we try to do is to maintain the roads that we have. So road maintenance is something that we will be paying a lot of attention to. Mr. Vice President, I don't want to go into all the details that the Attorney General went into. So I just want to make sure I cover everything that the Ministry of Works will be doing to ensure that the roads are safer as we go forward. Mr. Vice President, the second schedule of the Act must be amended in accordance with the provision of Section 62(7) of the Act. Accordingly, the said schedule must be amended by the President, subject to an affirmative resolution of Parliament. Government is of the view that amendment of the said schedule must be made easier for future purposes and ought not to necessarily occupy the Parliament agenda. In the circumstances, it is proposed that Section 62(7) be amended to require the Minister with responsibility for transport to amend this schedule subject to negative resolution of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, that refers to basically the other areas that the speed limit is going to apply to, not necessarily 100 kilometers or the 80 kilometers. In the areas where we have the 50 kilometers, the 40 kilometers, the 30 kilometers, especially on the interchange and so, because we have monitored all the interchange, some interchange like the one in, is it Vistabella, where that interchange, I think that goes down to as low as 15 kilometers in some areas. So there will be speed limit signs in all the intersections to tell you what speed that you have to go at. Don't think that you're coming down the highway at 100 kilometers and you can approach the interchange at 100 kilometers. It does not work like that. So you will see signage as you approach the different areas to tell you what is the speed limit in these areas. Mr. Vice President, the Attorney General in piloting the bill would have gone into some of the areas that the license office would have, some of the upgrades at the license office. I just want to put on record that I'm happy that the license office have actually turned around to some extent. Yes, we have a long way to go in the license office, but we have launched a lot of programs in the license office recently. And just last week, we launched the driver's permit verification, where we can actually go on, and the citizens can go on and check to see if their driver's permit is valid. Even third parties can go on if someone used their driver's permit as an identification card and see if it is valid. And over the last 5 days, we have had over 15,000 hits on the site. It means that over 15,000 people in about 5 days would have gone and verified a driver's permit. We saw similar interest when we launched the certified copy, the vehicle verification. The idea is to get to the point with license office where you don't have to go to license office in Trinidad and Tobago. The idea is to get to the point where if you want a driver, if you have to renew a driver's permit, most of it can be done online. And then you can go to a kiosk somewhere and print your driver's permit and pay for it online. There's no need with technology now that we have to take 2 and 3 days to renew a driver's permit. Yes, we are doing well at Caroni. People are telling me, look, in half an hour, in some instances in 45 minutes and so. But with technology now, you don't need to go to a license office to renew a driver's permit. Very soon, you will not have to go to get a certified copy. Because if you go to your insurance company and they want a physical copy, they can print it. They will pay a fee, obviously, but you don't have to go to the license. And that is a far cry from where we were a couple months ago, where if you want a certified copy in Tobago, you had to go in Tobago, pay, wait, somebody had to come down to Trinidad, then they'll go back up on the boat, and you might get it 2 or 3 weeks after. Right now, you could get a certified copy in Tobago immediately. It's printed there on the spot. You don't even have to wait 24 hours. You don't have to wait at all. We have that in 4 sites right now operating. Very soon, it will be in all the license office. Part of the plan of the Ministry of Works is to upgrade, every year, to upgrade 1 license office to international standards. In 2017, we opened Caroni. 2018, the plan was for Arima. We have a little hiccup with the Arima location, but definitely the Arima residents will get a new license office very soon. And I'm hoping that it happens early in 2018. It may not be the license office that was planned for Arima, but the facilities at Arima is just not adequate, and we do intend to continue that. I know we are looking at another site, I think it's in Princestown. Throughout Trinidad and Tobago, the idea is to upgrade at least 1 license office every year to get the international standards. So I'm really happy that the license office is showing signs of improving. What we launched this week, we started the process where the vehicular licensing a vehicle in Trinidad takes sometimes 3 weeks. I can't understand how somebody will call me and tell me they're waiting for a license over a month. So what we started this week is a new system where some people may not be too in favor of it, because this personalized number that everybody keep blocking this number and blocking that will be a thing of the past very soon. We have started where the computer system will generate your number. So whenever you go to license your vehicle, immediately you'll get your number. And at the end of the series, where there's this problem of a backlog that people have to wait 3 and 4 weeks, it's simple. Somebody blocked a lot of numbers. Nobody wants these old numbers. You can't go into a new system, a new series, until you get rid of all the old numbers, and nobody wants it. So then everybody keep calling the ministry to say, well, it's 3 months, a month, 3 weeks, and they're not licensing the vehicle. The reason for that is that because they have all these old numbers there, and nobody don't want it. Well, that is something of the past. We have started a new system. Whatever little teething problem we have, we expect to sort it out by the next series, so that once you go to license a vehicle, it's supposed to be a same-day something. And there's no point in going to San Fernando to license a vehicle, but they have to send the documents to Caroni. Or if you go to Port of Spain, the documents have to go to Caroni. This day and age with technology, it's not supposed to work like that. So we expect to have that fixed by the next series, where you can go to any license office and license your vehicles. And the documents don't have to go down to Caroni head office, and then they will send back up a number and all them kind of thing. Those are the things that technology going to help us significantly with. Mr. Vice President, where we are with the spot speed camera systems, I am really happy to announce that the spot speed camera system, which will be done in 3 phases, and some of the areas that we have earmarked for phase 1 is the Uriah Butler Highway in the vicinity of the Diwali Nagar, the Uriah Butler Highway in the vicinity of the Caroni Bird Sanctuary, the Solomon Hultroy Highway in the Carson Field near Seram Brothers, and I think that's one of the areas that they complained that we had a lot of accidents. On the Solomon Hultroy Highway in Freeport, Solomon Hultroy Highway in Macaulay, another area that Senator Ramdin identified, the Solomon Hultroy Highway in Gasparilla, El Sicuro and Trin-City have already been installed, and those are the pilot projects. In phase 2, we have the Claude Noel Highway in Tobago, the Trin-City Central Road, the Diego Martin Four Roads intersection, Golden Grove, Piarco, the Barataria Mova, Eastern Main Road intersection. And I can go on, but in coming up with these areas, again, the traffic management branch would have studied the data. They looked at the areas where the most collisions took place at the intersections. And we have 30 sites in 3 phases that we expect to complete. Couple that with the spot speed cameras and the 15,
you have 5 more minutes.
Sorry, and the 15 speed guns, I think we should be able to achieve the sort of discipline on the road that we're looking for. Mr. Vice President, in closing, I just want to compliment Ms. Sharon Inglefield and her team Arrive Alive. There are a couple of other organizations that we have been working with, but I just want to single out Ms. Sharon Inglefield and her team, because they have worked diligently with our team at the ministry. And I also want to single out at the ministry Mr. Adande Pigot, who is a traffic engineer, and also Mr. Marvin Gonzalez, who were the key drivers of this legislation and bringing us to this point where we are. These are some young professionals at the Ministry of Works and Transport who have been doing human service to this country. And if we continue to encourage them, I am sure our country will definitely have a road system that is equivalent to any first world country. Mr. Vice President, having said that, I thank you. And
Senator Hussain. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this bill
an act to amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. And Mr. Vice President, while this bill is 3 pages long and only 2 clauses, the consequences that are associated with this bill is by no means trivial or small in any way. The effects of this bill has serious consequences if it's not handled responsibly. And I just want to correct one thing that the minister would have indicated, is that he said that the bill is to increase the speed limit on highways. But from reading the bill, it is to increase for all of the non-built, outside of all the built-up areas. So it's really increasing the speed limit based on various classes of vehicles also. So there are 2 distinctions in this bill. And we applaud this bill simply because this speed limit has been existing pre-independence since 1956. So it's about time that we revisit the speed limit because things have changed, the roads have changed, the types of vehicles have changed, and even the culture of drivers have changed in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is the reason for our parliament and so that we can legislate laws that can be in conformity with the changes in society. And while the members on this side of the bench are supportive of the bill, I note with some concern that we have with this bill in terms of, firstly, it's a populist decision because this bill was brought to appease the public outcry, and I would have joined that voice because it's quite frustrating at times to be driving at 80 on the highway. Sometimes you may even cross the speed limit and you don't even know. It's only when you glimpse the speedometer, then you would even realize that you're over the 80. And I note also that no study was presented to us or any statistics. Bills like these should have been data-driven and data-oriented. The minister indicated that our highways, the maximum speed limit would have been 110 kilometers. Now, the suggested increase here is 100 kilometers. Now, we don't have any studies to suggest in terms of the road usage or any data at all in terms of the foundation of this bill. And also, we heard that there were no issues of, or rather, there were no consultations regarding the increase of the speed limit. So therefore, I urge the government, although we know it's a noble intention, when bringing legislation like this, it must be supported with some sort of evidence so that we can make proper and informed decisions. Also, when we look at the speed guns, this legislation to implement speed guns in Trinidad and Tobago was brought to this parliament by the People's Partnership Government. And it was brought in a way to assist the police in dealing with errant road users and the use of technology in order to secure proper convictions for those who would have violated the laws. And it was also the People's Partnership Government that would have acquired the speed guns, and it was operationalized by this government. And when it was operationalized by this government, we saw that there was a culture change because persons now became aware of what the speed limit was because they were being charged and they were being convicted and they had to pay a fine. And it is only with that awareness then there was the outcry that, listen, we need to change the speed limit. And when we look at the speed guns themselves, it serves as a deterrence. And myself being a student of criminology, for any initiative or measure to actually be a proper or efficient deterrence, there must be 3 things. The initiative, it must be swift. So we must have swift justice. It must be serious, so the consequences must also be serious. But most importantly, the punishment must be certain. And with the speed guns, it's easier now for the police to prosecute those individuals who are in violation of the laws because of the technology that they can utilize. And while we are sitting here in this parliament debating on this bill, I am sure that there are users of the road currently that are exceeding the 80 kilometer speed limit. And Senator Ramdeen would have raised this point, and I think it's an important point because there's a leakage of the intelligence of the police service in this country. And I say this because there's a WhatsApp group And this WhatsApp group updates you and tells you where the speed guns are, what time they're there for, and everybody, when they approach these intersections, or they approach these areas, they start to slow down. But when they slow down there, after they pass there, it's extra board again, and they go. Because they know that there's no other speed trap on that stretch. And that is wrong. Because if this continues to happen, it would now show that whatever deterrent effect that these guns have are ineffective. And while I'm on this topic of the road traffic enforcement, there are certain groups in Trinidad and Tobago that are using our nation's roads as drag racing tracks. And I say this because there was one night I was driving home. This is on the Nasalura Marg Road. That's the road where the Wali Nagar is, right outside of the Ministry of Agriculture. And there were about 80 persons standing there. This was about 10 o'clock in the night. And they were drag racing on that stretch. There's a new road that is created from that road straight to the Endeavour Road. And they were drag racing. This is extremely dangerous. There's the Price Plaza complex there. There's also the Heartland Plaza. Persons who are going home with their children at that hour in the night, they now face the consequences of being hit by one of these individuals who are drag racing. So I call on the police to please do something about this, that you do frequent patrols so that these activities don't happen. Now, when we look at the increase in the speed limit, we must also examine the safety risks that are involved in increasing the speed limit. Now, there's one school of thought that suggests that once we increase the speed limit, the risk of accidents become higher. And as such, we as a state must take action to prevent this. And if we look at the figures that I got from Arrive Alive, their website, it would suggest there's a linear decline in the amount of road fatalities over the years from 2008 to 2016. In 2016, there's 135 road fatalities. That is still too much. So we must do more to prevent these road fatalities. And what we must also examine also is the cause of these road fatalities. Is it only speed alone, or is it because of driving under the influence, or is it because of defective vehicles or bad roads? We must also examine this so that we can be data-driven and oriented when making policies such as this. And one senator raised the point of the ages, I believe it's the Attorney General, sorry, raised the issue of the ages of the victims of these fatalities. And between the 2015 and 2016 figures, the largest age group is that of the 25 to 34. These are persons who are in the prime of their lives. They have talents to offer our country, and they are dying on our nation's roads. I lost two friends already who I went to secondary school with. Mr. Anstey Payne, he got into an accident in the Rivulet Road. And recently, Alex Lala, who got into an accident outside of the Chief Brand factory about 2 months ago. And they are very resourceful, very talented individuals. Now, that's two less individuals that we have to contribute positively to our society. And I say this because we must look at models all over the world in order to try to come with some uniform policy or international standards when we increase the speed limit. I looked briefly at Germany and the Autobahn that they have there. Now, although they have no restrictions at certain parts of the Autobahn, there's not as much accidents as certain countries where there's a limit in the speed requirement. And one of the things that Germany has that we should implement here is strict licensing test system. In Germany, you have to complete a minimum of 25 to 45 hours of professional instructions plus 12 hours of theory before you can get a driver's permit. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have nothing like that. Today, you go to licensing office, you apply for your driver's permit, they issue it a provisional permit immediately, then you wait for your test, your regulations, you write the regulations, and then you go for your driving test and you are issued a permit. I say that we cannot do this because we are now giving and empowering persons with the responsibilities to be on our nation's roads. So we should look at other models in terms of strengthening the licensing system that we have here in Trinidad. And when I was about 17, I went to the licensing office in Shogunas to get my permit. And as soon as I walk out, there were touts coming to from the driving school. Come learn with us. Now, there are about 6 or 7 schools set up right there. All of these schools are unregulated. And while some schools will do very good service in terms of training the individuals to drive properly on the road, there are those who just are there and they simply collect their monies, and these persons do not have the ability or the opportunity to learn to drive properly, because we all know of the corruption that plagues the licensing authority. So I'm asking that we look at some form of training of these schools or accreditations of these driving schools so that these persons will be trained properly. I mean, there's no requirement for you to do a highway test. Some persons are issued a permit and then for the first time they are driving on the highway. That is extremely dangerous. And one other thing that Germany has is that they have well-maintained roads. The Autobahn is well-maintained. It's built up of a series of concrete layers. In Trinidad and Tobago, our highways sometimes have potholes, the highway. These contribute to accidents, Mr. Vice President. And in another place, an issue was raised about the inspections of vehicles in Trinidad and Tobago. Recently, there were some exercises taking place across the country where the licensing officers, they were actually conducting various exercises in terms of charging persons who didn't have the inspection certificate, who did not complete the inspection after the 5 years has elapsed of their vehicles. And when you go to the inspection pits, these persons, they do their inspection, and again, the corruption is known to everybody in the Senate about the inspection, that the inspection is done. And I say this because some persons who has gotten the inspection done are still not issued with the sticker. So when they are stopped, they have to present their form that they would have given. So I asked the minister to look into this issue also. And in Germany, before a vehicle is inspected also, you must have a first aid kit in your vehicle. You must have a warning triangle, and you must also have a reflective vest. So I think these are initiatives that we should look at in Trinidad and Tobago to come up to international standards. We cannot continue to be operating in 2017 with 1956 laws. Now, I also looked at a study that was conducted with regards to the guardrails. And this study was with respect to the safety performance of the road barriers in Indiana and the risk of it reducing injuries. And what they did is that the safety was measured with the probability of injury or death after hitting an object. So that was the percentage, that was the test they used. Vehicles would hit these objects and they would now calculate the percentage of damage or injury a person would face. And the study compared 3 items. It compared the guardrails, it compared the concrete barrier walls, and it compared the cable barriers. And from the study, it was found that the odds of injuries are reduced by 39% for median concrete barrier walls. It was reduced by 65% for guard rail faces. And it was reduced by 85% for median cable barriers. So while the minister, he indicated that it is very expensive to maintain the cable barriers, it is quite frankly the safest choice. And we cannot be putting a price on the safety of our citizens, because for far too long, we have lost very noble people due to road accidents. And I saw that in the developmental fund, there was an allocation made of $6 million for the New Jersey barriers. And I would just ask the minister if you can clarify where these barriers are going to set up, or if there's a possibility that instead of putting the New Jersey barriers, whether or not they can install the cable barriers there because it's the more safer thing to do. And when we look at that stretch, that highway, from Mount Hope straight to San Fernando, if somebody gets into an accident, let's say in the vicinity of Couva, Chaguanas, or Claxton Bay, Gasparillo, the closest hospitals are either the Mount Hope, the Eric Williams Medical Facility, or the San Fernando General Hospital. Now, the Couva Children's Hospital was designed with an accident and emergency ward. This is to ensure that persons who get into an accident within that, that vicinity, that they can receive immediate medical attention. And the hospital was equipped in order to deal with these accidents and these emergencies. So I ask that this government please open the Children's Couva Hospital. And there was one point that the Minister of Works and Transport alluded to, and that was the fund in order to pay victims of who would have suffered due to uninsured drivers. And in the United Kingdom, there's the Motor Insurance Bureau, which is a corporate body that is set up in order to deal with those persons who may have been injured, and they would now be compensated if the injury was caused or the accident was caused or contributed by an uninsured driver. Now, I know in Trinidad and Tobago, the Accident Victims Compensation Fund, that was actually set up in 2015. Minister Hawaii, the Minister of Finance at the time, would have made, I believe, an allocation of $20 million towards that fund. So I ask that the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Finance set up this fund, because there are certain individuals, the two orphans that Mr. Ramdeen would have referred to in his contribution, that they are now left parentless. Who are going to take care of these children? So we need this fund in order to help those citizens, because you can be driving innocently on the road, and you, let's just say, for example, Mr. Vice President, that you are a third-party insurer, that you have an insurance third-party coverage, and you are hit by an uninsured driver, and that driver is liable for the accident. Now, you would have to recover from him personally. Normally, this might be a man of no means. Now, you recover nothing. You have an empty judgment. So this is where the fund will step in order to compensate you for whatever loss that you may have suffered via this accident. So I ask again that the Ministry of Finance look into setting up this fund and operationalizing it, so that we can bring relief to those citizens who were affected by accidents on the nation's roads. And as I conclude, Mr. Vice President, I would like to say that I am in support of this bill, but more has to be done to alleviate the traffic woes. It is not only increasing the speed limit, but we must also undertake the process of decentralization. For far too long, we have used Port of Spain as a hub. We need to remove some of the ministries and place them in different parts of the country, so that the traffic inflow into Port of Spain would now be less, so that we can prevent an incident like what occurred last Thursday with the BTM that caused inconvenience to hundreds of citizens on their way home from Port of Spain and also to Port of Spain. So I emphasize that there's a lot more to be done, but we must ensure that our citizens are safe. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Taurel Shrikissoon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for recognizing me and allowing me to contribute to this bill before us in this honorable House. I would really like to commend this government first for bringing such legislation to this House and listening to the cries of the population with respect to the speed limit and finding a way, or seeking to find a way, to appease the general public, while at the same time trying to change the driving culture in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to commend the Honorable Attorney General, the Honorable Minister of Works, and all their teams and their technocrats for the type of work and investment that they would have done to bring this bill to this House and then to eventually operationalize, which I'm guessing may not be too far from this date. The bill before us is a very short bill, I should say, and I want to agree with Senator Hussain, who just says it has wide-ranging implications, although just 2 clauses. So not to get into too much of the detail of the bill, as it was addressed by many of the speakers before me, this amendment has 2 clauses brought before this Honorable House. The first clause being the short title of the bill, and the second clause introducing a couple of amendments. One of the amendments being for there to be negative resolution of Parliament with respect to the adjusting the second schedule of speed limits. And then the inclusion of a new category on that second schedule, which pertains to goods vehicles, the licensed MGW maximum gross weight, of which does not exceed 3,200 kilograms without a trailer, the speed limit being assigned 100 kilometers outside a built-up area and 50 kilometers within a built-up area. So what we're seeing, and it also changes the speed limit for the classification of any other motor vehicle from 80 to 100 outside a built-up area. Mr. Vice President, as I said, I support the type of work that was done to bring this bill to this House, and I support the consideration of increasing the speed limit from 80 to 100. However, as I've listened to many of the speakers here and to some of the debate, some of the contributions in the other place, I've noted that there's a significant acceptance of this piece of legislation. And while I also want to join in that realm, I've seen some concerns that I would like to raise in this House, and I would like us to really think about the points that I would like to raise and really determine whether or not it has value or merit in it. So what we have here before us, or should I say this, a driver or vehicle leaves the San Fernando, just like myself, comes up the Solomon Hochoy Highway, Uriah Butler Highway, right through Beetham and into Port of Spain. His new speed limit, once assented to, would be 100 kilometers, maximum speed limit. That same vehicle leaves San Fernando onto the southern main road and heads north to Chagonas, through Marabella, Couva, Point Lisas, where there are areas that are not built up. Is that vehicle still obliged or still available, that speed limit to 100 kilometers? And then to Senator Ramdeen's point, who talked about the accidents on Clark Rochard Road and what we know very popularly in the South known as the ring roads. Is that 100 kilometers per hour as well? The Lady Young Road that the minister spoke of on areas that are outside the built-up area. That's what I'm getting from this, that once a road is outside of the built-up area, such as the ring roads in South, the speed limit is 100 kilometers, the maximum speed limit. Were those roads designed for such? Now, I'm asking the question, and I seek clarification if I'm wrong. But this is what I'm getting from the legislation. And if the minister would like to give way.
The 100 kilometers is for the major highways. All these roads that you refer to will have different speed limits on them.
Thank you, Minister. But that just brings me now to another place in my presentation today. And I would really like to quote from the Highways Act 4801 of Trinidad and Tobago, which says, a highway, according to the Act, means a whole or part of any road, thoroughfare, street, trail, trace, or way maintainable at the public expense and dedicated to the public use, whether by way of express or implied grant. That is saying to me that every road in Trinidad is a highway under 4801 of the Act. So how can we say that it's for specific highways when the Act that defines the highway is saying that every road?
It is specified which highway that will be 100 kilometers. It is specified. Every road is specified. And the areas for 30 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 80 kilometers is specified.
Thank you, thank you, Senator. But I'm confused because that's not before us. That is not before us. That is not before this House. So it's saying, according to the schedule presented, or according to the act or the bill here, that it's outside a built-up area. And a highway, according to the Highways Act, is saying any road. So are we really now increasing the speed limit from 80 to 100 on every road according to the Act? And the Minister is very correct. I want to say this early on, that I support the initiative of 100 kilometers on specified highways. But that's not here. That's not here. And that's why I have a concern of it. Whether or not the legislation was drafted to bring about the intent that the Honorable Minister and maybe the Attorney General wants to bring about. So what is the speed limit that a driver is supposed to abide by on Inaprima Mayara Road? I don't know. Because it's outside. There are areas along that road that's outside a built-up area. Is it 100? Along the Eastern Main Road, in areas that are not built up, is it 100? I'm not sure, and I'm not getting that clarity from the legislation before us. I stand to be corrected, but it's just based on my interpretation, and I ask for clarity with respect to it, especially in the context of the way in which a highway has been defined in the Act 4801. Section 3 of that same Highways Act provides a classification of roads. It classifies roads as main roads, special roads, secondary roads, local roads, streets, and development roads. A highway, in this act, a development road, a development road means a highway that is a trace, trail, or state trace constructed for the purpose of agricultural or other development. A local road means a highway that is not classified as a main road. A main road means a highway that, in the opinion of the Minister, is of prime importance by reason of being a main channel of communication throughout Trinidad and Tobago. What am I getting at? The Highways Act provides for a classification of roads. And so, in this act, or this amendment we have here, we have the speed limit being adjusted from 80 to 100 according to a criterion which is built up or not built up. But here it is, we have in the Highways Act a way in which the roads are classified. Now I'm going somewhere with this. If you take this same Highways Act of 4801 and you go to the schedule at the back of subsidiary legislation, there's a classification of highways order which talks about all highways being classified as main roads. Page 126. All highways as main roads. So it lists all the main roads in Trinidad and Tobago, and then it goes on to say a little later on, new classification since 1982, Solomon Hochoy Highway, Audrey Jeffers Highway, Maraval Parkway, Uriah Butler Highway, the Abattoir Road, Balizay Link Road, and Rienzi Curtin Highway. So these highways are really classified under main roads. The same roads that we're seeking to increase the speed limit on. Now I understand the intent, and whether my interpretation is right or wrong, I'm unsure. But I ask for clarification on it, because what you can end up with is all these main roads being classified as main roads, including the highways, having a speed limit of 100 kilometers, which is what I'm getting at from the way in which the legislation is drafted. And that I have an objection to. I'm not having an objection to the 100 kilometers on the highways. I'm having an objection with the 100 kilometers on all the other roads outside of prescribed highways. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, according to the Act, a highway could be any road. And that's the concern that I would have with this. And just to address this, and I should say Tobago as well, the Claude Noel Highway. And just to address this, I'm going to ask for consideration being given to a definition or term used to classify what we freely use, or the term that we freely use, which would be highways, for the main roads or the main highways of the Audrey Jeffers Highway, the Churchill Roosevelt Highway, the Solomon Hochoy Highway, the Uriah Butler Highway, and all the other highways that we would have. And to define it adequately or properly define it, introduce it as a classification of roads, and then limit the 100 kilometers specifically to those roads. I see no reason why roads such as the Clark Rochard Road, the Penal Rock Road, the M1, M2 ring roads should have a speed limit of 100 kilometers. I see no reason for that at all. There's no reason to touch the speed limits on those roads. But we've heard a lot today about the engineering of roads, and that our roads in Trinidad, and I'm guessing here the highways we were pertaining to, or the speed, or what the desire, or the speed at which the highway was constructed was to accommodate up to 110. Is the Naprimo Mayar Road, or was the Naprimo Mayar Road constructed for 110? Was the Clark Road constructed for 110? Was the Lady Young Road or wherever outside built-up areas constructed for 110? And if it is not, then we need to be specific to which roads 100 would be applicable to. And that would really help drivers, because now we don't know which roads are 100 and which roads are not. So I have a concern with that. So I'm saying, as a way in which that we could improve the legislation, introduce a classification of roads, probably expressways, freeways, motorways, list the roads or the highways that we have under that, let it be that, whether it's expressways, freeways, whatever term, and introduce a third column on Schedule 2 and leave it specifically to those roads. Because now we are aware that there are several projects of the government to improve the road network for Trinidad and Tobago, and that we commend. But then how do we incorporate those new roads with the new speed limit? That's my question. So I'd really like that addressed. The second point that I want to raise this evening is that of the adjustment to the schedule, or Schedule 2, which pertains to the MGW. What we saw here in this piece of legislation would be a change to the maximum gross weight of 2,540 kilograms, changing up to 3,200 kilograms with or without a trailer, or goods vehicles, the licensed maximum gross weight of which does not exceed 3,200 kilograms with a trailer. So you have over and above 3,200, less than 3,200 with a trailer. So essentially, once you have a trailer, you're limited to 65. And the introduction of paragraph F, which says goods vehicle, the licensed MGW of which does not exceed 32 kilograms without a trailer. And I listened to the presentation of the Attorney General, who says that they were caught in a peculiar place where you had a particular or special type of vehicle having a higher MGW or heavier vehicle and has the capacity to drive at a faster rate. And in order to allow the free flow of traffic, we've opted to increase or allow these vehicles that is a little bit heavier to get to 100 kilometers. So what we've really tinkered with was the MGW, the maximum gross weight. And I want to zero in on this for a reason. Section 50 of the same act before us, 4850, for the purposes of this part, and I would like to quote from it, there shall be the following classes of motor vehicles. Class 1, motorcycles. Class 2, wheel tractors. Class 3, light motor vehicles, including private motor cars, taxis, with weight not exceeding 2,270. And then we have Class 4, heavy motor vehicles, including motor vehicles whose maximum gross weight does not exceed 2,950. So what this amendment is doing, when it switches from 2,540 to 3,200, you are actually moving across classifications according to this act. Now, if most of us take out our driving permits and look at it, you'll realize on it, there's a class for which you are entitled to drive. Class 3, lightweight, up to 2,950, and Class 4, 2,950 and above. When we move the speed limit for a 3,200 kilogram vehicle when we move the maximum gross weight from up to 3,200, you are now allowing a class 4 vehicle to drive at a speed previously that was restricted to class 3. Here's my question in this. Is it that we're saying now that a class 4 driver now has 2 speed limits for which he must subscribe to? And in order to determine which speed that he needs to subscribe to, he needs to come out and look at the MGW of the vehicle? And when a policeman points a speed gun at the vehicle and stops it in the middle of the night, in order to appropriately put the penalty, especially when we introduce the tiered version of the ticketing system, when the faster you go, there's a higher demerit point, that the policeman needs to go and check the MGW of the vehicle? How is it that we're going to enforce that law? How is it that you're going to put appropriate signage and regulations for a class 4 driver when there are 2 speed limits for which he must subscribe? Because it's very specific according to the regulation. That I have a problem with. A law is supposed to be simple to enforce, simple to implement, and obviously to show.
Thank you for giving me, Honourable Senator. I really want to be able to respond properly, and I'm not following a certain aspect of your contribution. Would you mind just perhaps repeating, or if not restating, where it is the obligation of a class 4 or another type of classification driver is obliged to follow a separate limit? You just mentioned a regulation biting into it. Could you perhaps explain a little bit more fulsome?
Sure,
please?
sure. Thank you, Honorable Attorney General. If you go to the regulation for a class 4 driver, you will realize that he's limited to 65 kilometers per hour. And a heavy vehicle or class 4 vehicle starts at 2950 and above. Oh, it's Trinidad and Tobago's regulation that you have to. I can't tell you that, but I could let you know. So what you have, and I wrote that regulation, and that's how I remembered. Right.
For testing.
Yes.
I see. Thank you.
Right. So it's up to 65 there, and now you're saying that a class 4 vehicle can now go up to 100. So I'm confused. As a class 4 driver myself, I'm confused. Now that you're into the band of a class 4 vehicle, then is it that I now have 2 speed limits that I must subscribe to? And that can't be right. That cannot be right. Now here's the other implication of changing that MGW from 2540 to 3200. When you have, or I should say this, consider this category of vehicles. The Hyundai H100 mini truck, MGW, of 2,746 kilograms. The Isuzu 1.5-ton truck, MGW, 2,940. The Jack mini truck. The Kia K2700, which is a very popular vehicle, MGW, 2,850. Each of these trucks has a carrying capacity of 1.5 tons when they're hauling cargo. Is it that you're now saying that as you amend or you shift the 2540 up to 3200, that this category of mini trucks hauling 1.5 tons of cargo can now go up to 100 kilometers loaded? I have a concern with that. I really have a concern with that. We're speaking about road safety. We're speaking about the motoring public and safety and ensuring that our public is safe. But here it is, we are empowering a vehicle hauling cargo to increase the speed limit. So in doing so, while we are trying to appease one sector, which would probably pick up the Nissan Frontier, Hilux, Ranger, whatever it may be, we would also have a situation where you have mini trucks now having the ability to drive faster, hauling cargo of 1.5 tons. And so I'm saying here that the manipulation of the MGW as the variable to now permit these vehicles to drive faster and more so away from the classification according to Section 50 should not really be used. It should not be used, because it is bringing about an unintended consequence or a demerit for society, the very same issue for which we are trying to address. And so the MGW cannot, or should not, I should say, be used as the variable that gives the motoring public of those who would own those heavier pickups the ability or autonomy to get up to 100 kilometers. It can't be used because you are creating a demerit. I've thought of a solution, and I will just mention it here. And it's not to say that it's cast in stone, but it's just to reflect my thinking and logic on it. If we say goods vehicles with a fastened tray cover, fastened, must be locked, fastened tray cover has the ability to get up to 100. I'm just saying that. And you define a tray cover as a cover that has been installed at the sides of the height of the tray of the vehicle. So if it's a pickup, it's at the exact height of the tray. And it must be fastened. Why it must be fastened? Because if it's not fastened and it's taking cargo, then it's a goods vehicle. But if it's fastened, it's saying it almost has the characteristics of an SUV. What would this do? One, it can be easily determined by a traffic officer whether the vehicle has an installed a fastened tray cover or not. So police stops you, it can say fastened tray cover or not. If it's open, you're not obliged. You cannot be driving at 100. It would restrict all vehicles with open trays from driving over 65. It will encourage vehicle owners with open trays to cover them. And when they're covered, the cargo is actually concealed. It omits those who will be using those same vehicles for commercial use, because those vehicles have a dual function, some for personal reasons, some for commercial. So if you're using it for commercial, then the tray is open, then you're not entitled to drive at 100. Then it's saying here, it conforms to the classification of vehicles that we have here, Class 3, up to 2950, Class 4, heavy T. It addresses my concern of two speed limits for one category of vehicle. And so, in terms of addressing it, it can just be inserted into the second schedule, goods vehicles with fastened tray covers. Fastened tray covers, not one that has been used by a temporary measure, but fastened. And so at any point in time, those same pickups are required to be used for commercial use. The cover could just be lifted. And so you have it. That's just my thought process on it. And that way, you will be able to probably permit those with those pickups to get to 100 without adjusting the MGW and creating a demerit or unintended demerit in the legislation. As I come to an end, Mr. Vice President, I would like to say as long as we maintain, according to this schedule, second schedule, outside a built-up area or within a built-up area, I would like to see the words, and I'm just suggesting, and that within a built-up area, approaching also be inserted. So approaching or within a built-up area, the speed limits should be adhered to, not just within. And as Senator Richard said, in one of my earlier contributions, I too raised the issues of electronic signboards, and I'm glad that the minister has responded and said that he has given an authorization to move the illegal ones, but the LED signboards really creates a difficulty. And if you pass outside this parliament at night, the ones across the street actually lights up the entire street at night, and it is providing, or it is creating a problem. And one of my recommendations that I would like to be considered would be stop signs or give way to merging traffic on entrances onto the highways, especially sometimes at Gasparillo or Claxton Bay. People make the entrance onto the highways, and they come onto the highways as though they have the right of way. They should be giving way to oncoming traffic or flowing traffic. So I'm asking for that to be considered. So given the concerns that I have raised here, Mr. Vice President, I have asked for clarification on the roads on which 100 kilometers would be allowed. And if it is that we cannot separate or appropriately classify the roads for which 100 kilometers would be permissible, then we need to do so. It cannot be that 100 kilometers, according to, would be for highways, and according to the Act 4801, a highway could be any road. I have a concern with that. To be using the MGW as the variable that we want to tinker with or manipulate so as to achieve a desired result, I have demonstrated that tinkering with that variable has an unintended consequence, which is a gap. And I have proposed or offered one solution. I'm sure there could be many, and I'm sure it could be corrected. But so I'm just using that to demonstrate that the MGW variable is insufficient to be used. And so I've raised 3 other brief amendments to consider. On the third column in the second schedule, whether we could consider using the word approaching as well as within a built-up area. So approaching or within a built-up area. My 4th point was that of the electronic signboards. And 5th, stop signs or give way to oncoming traffic at entrances onto our nation's highways. Those few words, Mr. Vice President. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, it's an honor and privilege to stand here to contribute to this bill, a bill to amend the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. I'll be making a brief intervention today, just to raise a couple points, more historical than anything else, to set a template in which we are debating this legislation. And I think I was tempted to join this debate as a former Minister of Works and Transport myself on matters that I am quite seized of, if I should say so. First of all, let me congratulate the Attorney General and the Minister of Works and Transport for presenting a well-thought-out legislation, which obviously has the support of the opposition bench and the independent bench also. Like the Minister of Works and like the Attorney General, I really want to congratulate the hard work of the legal department of the Ministry of Works and Transport, led by Mr. Gonzalez, and the traffic management branch with Mr. Pigot. I know these 2 gentlemen personally, and I know they are very, very dedicated professionals, young professionals, and I know the future of the Ministry of Works is in very, very good hands. And it has always been my position to support young talent, and because the future is with the youths. But I will really want to discuss this bill very briefly in the context of 2 issues. 1, road safety, and 2, traffic management, because that is what the whole automobile industry and mobility is all about. And speaking about mobility, let me just go back to the beginning. Mr. Vice President, as a student of history, there were 3 major inventions that propelled the Industrial Revolution. The first is something called the Bessemer converter. And that was when steel was mass-produced in Europe for the first time. And that is what catapulted the Industrial Revolution in Europe. The second was the printing press. And we all know the story of that. And the third, and probably the most significant of them all, coming at the end of the Industrial Revolution, was something called the internal combustion engine. And let me just quote from The Economist magazine, August 12 to 18, 2017, just a couple months ago. And I quote, "Human inventiveness has still not found a mechanical process to replace horses as the propulsion for vehicles," lamented Le Petit Journal, a French newspaper, in December of 1893. Its answer was to organize a Paris to Rouen race for horseless carriages, held the following July. The 102 entrants included vehicles powered by steam, petrol, electricity, compressed air, and hydraulics. Only 21 qualified for the 126-kilometer race, which attracted huge crowds. The clear winner was the internal combustion engine. And Mr. Vice President, the code goes on to say, over the next century, it would go on to power industry and to change the world. The internal combustion engine, probably more than anything else, has changed the world. again in a historical context, because you have to understand what countries are facing today. It started with the Ford assembly line in 1913. For the first time, the mass production of vehicles. This was followed by the age of American and European cars, which was Ford and General Motors in the US, and the European vehicles probably championed by the Volkswagen Group out of Germany. As a matter of fact, today Volkswagen is the largest manufacturer of vehicles in the world. They've surpassed Toyota, I think, a couple of years ago. And then came, after the war, the period of the Japanese. Toyota, Nissan, Honda. And then coming in the tail end, starting with a low-end market with the Koreans, Kia and Hyundai and what have you. Today, they are considered very, very credible vehicles. But what all this mass production caused, today, as we speak, there are 1.2 billion vehicles on this planet. The population is just over 6 billion. You know. The corollary to that was that every single country now has access to cost-effective, I don't want to say cheap, but affordable vehicles. And just as the cell phone is now, everybody wants a cell phone, it's now a personal market. It is the ambition of every single person in the third world and in the developed world to own a vehicle. The consequences to that, Madam President, is that countries have to build connectivity. And that takes place at two levels. At the first, at the level of the major thoroughfares are the highways. And then there's the feeder and the secondary and tertiary roads. The classic example of highway systems, obviously, would be the US interstates. And as Senator Hussein mentioned, probably the best in the world is the German Autobahn. But what that has led to is, especially in third world countries, gridlock, traffic congestion, and major road safety issues. And it is in the context of traffic management, because it makes no sense having an invention of man to create mobility. And the mobility has been created to such an extent that it is shooting itself in the feet, because the mobility is stopping the mobility. It is because everybody has a vehicle and the road network is not sufficient that it in itself defeating the purpose that the vehicle was made for. So you might as well walk to work or ride a bicycle to work than drive in your vehicle. So it is that aspect of it that I want to deal with, traffic management, because traffic management and speed goes hand in hand. Traffic management there are two basic concepts in traffic management. The first is called road storage, and the second is intersection management. Road storage is simple. A two-lane highway versus a three-lane highway. The three-lane highway has a greater storage capacity than a two-lane highway. By the same token, a four-lane highway has greater storage capacity than a three-lane highway. The classic example of that is when I was Minister of Works in 2002 to 2005. Everybody was clamoring for the Grand Bazaar interchange, which was subsequently built. But I said at the time, the more pressing priority was to build a third lane from Grand Bazaar to Chaguanas. Because if it didn't increase the storage capacity of the Solomon Hochoy Highway from Grand Bazaar to Chaguanas, you're wasting money on the interchange. Because with that signalized traffic light, there was still traffic backup from Grand Bazaar to Chaguanas on an evening. So all the interchange would have done is accentuate that problem. So concurrent with intersection management you have to deal with storage. Storage means creating new roads, getting additional lanes on the correct highway. And one of the weaknesses of this country over the decades is that with all the amount of traffic that is now on the road, we haven't built enough roads. The storage capacity in the country is limited. If you do not take the addition of lanes on the highways, no new highway has been constructed in this country for over 30 years. The extension of the Solomon Hochoy Highway going down into Point Fortin now will actually be the first. And then when we start the Kumutu, the Manzalina Highway, that will be. Other than that, it's just maintaining the same base. The Southern Main Road, the SS Siparia Erie Road, the Naparima Mayaro Road, the Southern Main Road. That's all we have, you know. So the connectivity of this country is paramount. Under the Manning regime, he had a plan where he said that no part of this country should be more than 2.5 hours away from any other part. And that was the basis of the National Highways Program. That included the Point Fortin Highway, the Sandy Grande Highway into Manzalina, the San Fernando to Mayaro Highway, and there was to be another highway starting somewhere in Cuep and going down in a diagonal direction to somewhere down Rio Claro. So you would have had something resembling the interstate system in the United States. Good plan. We cannot implement it now because for financial constraints, but we are committed as a government to conclude the highway into Point Fortin and to do the highway from Kumutu to Manzalina. And then the other third new road will be the Sandy Grande to Tuco first-class road that will be linking up northeast Trinidad into the whole development process. So storage. The other major concept is intersection management. Where two roads meet is an intersection. So the simplest of intersection management is major road, minor road. So a minor road comes out in a major road have right of way, you wait until the traffic clears, and you take. But then what happens now if the major road has continual traffic and continuous traffic, and the minor road vehicle cannot get a chance to come out? You have to make a system for that. The two systems for that was traffic signalization, which is a traffic light, green, red. The length of the green time on the main road will be much more than the length of the green time on the minor road. And the British system, which is the roundabout. We have followed the American system almost by rote over the last 2 decades. For those of you, Senator Daneshwar Mahabe, remember the Kipalani roundabout? Remember the QF roundabout? We got rid of all of that. And we put traffic signalization. Probably it was the way to go at the time. So as the Minister of Works and Transport mentioned, there are people who do not even know how to use a roundabout. And I'm seen, to my pleasant surprise and happy for, the reintroduction of the roundabout system in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it will work very, very well. Barbados has it. Barbados has no traffic signalization on its highway. But the only difference with them is that they have enough good cricketers to name their roundabouts after. And the third level of intersection management is the overpass or the interchange. And that brings us to the concept of freeways, because it is linked to mobility from point A to point B, especially if you're going over a large distance. We virtually only have one freeway in Trinidad, which is the Uriah Butler Solomon Hochoy Highway that starts at Barataria, I would say, or the Beetham, and continues straight into, well, DB into Penal now. Okay? That highway will eventually end up in Point Fortin. It's the only freeway. It is also our intention to convert the Churchill-Roosevelt Highway into a freeway by creating overpasses at the major intersection. The first one was done at Grand Bazaar there, and the one that has a contract has been awarded already is the QEP interchange, and that will coordinate QEP, Makoya, and some of those areas, and probably there will be two more, probably one at Piaco and one further as you go to Arima. So when we get the Churchill-Roosevelt into a freeway, and that links to Kumoto, and then Kumoto goes on to Sandy Grande, and Sandy Grande goes on to Manzalina. The plan was to upgrade the Manzalina Road into a major first-class artery, and then you get a loop around the island. The plan is there. The plan is workable. So what we have now is to develop a road network and a traffic management system that caters for storage and intersection management. And that is the context in which I want to place this bill. And the concept of the road safety issues. Let me just deal with road safety very briefly. Senator Hussein spoke about the Autobahn in Germany. But I will deal with that very shortly. The road deaths statistics are alarming, especially in the United States, and this pattern has followed throughout the world in that context. At the turn of the century, it was virtually zero. Believe it or not, in the year 1901, there were 54 road deaths in the United States of America. Right now, it's 40,000 road deaths per annum in the United States of America. And the graph went up, and it really peaked in terms of road deaths in the 70s and 80s. And it has been declining since then, largely because of new road safety measures, in particular seatbelts. And you can see the clear difference of road fatalities prior to the introduction of seatbelts in these countries. And by and large, it is going down, and it is going down in developed countries at a significant rate. But let me just deal with this is my favorite highway system. I've traveled on it several times, is the German Autobahn. I don't want to repeat too much of what Senator Hussein said. But this is an article, 8 reasons that the German Autobahn is so much better than US highways. First and foremost, in a very paradoxical sense, the Autobahn has no speed limit, as was said. Drive at whatever speed you want. The recommended limit is 130 kilometers per hour. But if you want to go extra board, feel free. It's the safest highway system in the world. So fatality, what this proves is fatality has nothing to do with speed. Up to a limit, obviously. Okay? The second thing, and it was mentioned by Senator Hussein, is that German drivers are especially good because of the strict licensing system. And Senator Hussein mentioned it. Tons of lessons, and you have to go on the highway and take a test, and there's extensive examination, and you have to test and test and test. It is as difficult to get a German driver's permit as it's to pass an exam. It's a serious exam. Because as the AG and the Minister of Work said, you're putting a weapon into the hands of somebody, you know. So you cannot issue a licensed firearm to somebody and they're not trained. to use it. So by the same token, you can issue a driver's permit to somebody, and they're not trained properly to use it, because technically it's a weapon. The third aspect, as already mentioned by Senator Hussein, is the road pavement is extremely well maintained. And for the context of pavement here, pavement means the road surface. Pavement is not sidewalk, and the pavement is the road surface. Autobahn roads are also inspected regularly for irregularities in the road surface or any damage. If anything is found during these inspections, the whole area of the road around the damaged section is replaced. So I compliment the Minister of Work for his pothole patching, but in Germany, it's a much wider area that is excavated and then resheeted. That is fundamental to speed, because the slightest variation of elevation going at 120 kilometers per hour or 130 kilometers could use your stability at those high velocities. Signage, very critical. Reflectors. We're getting there. I don't think we're quite there as yet. Okay? But road signage, markers, and all the paraphernalia, barriers and what have you, as was mentioned before, the cable barriers and what, these are all very, very fundamental, especially on the highway system. But this is the one I like. Passing on the left is strictly enforced. It was mentioned here by the Minister of Works that he knew all these years as a young person, not so young again, that keep left except when overtaken. And you will be surprised to know how that impacts on traffic management. Everybody here has had the experience. 2 trucks alongside on the highway, going at 40 kilometers or 50 kilometers per hour. And they're blocking the traffic. And nobody is slowing down or accelerating to go back on the left lane to let the traffic flow. In Germany, you're getting a real charge for that. Okay? Because that is what keeps the mobile society alive. Because they know, as who mentioned productivity? I think Senator Richards. Yeah. The connectivity is the increased productivity at the end of the day. So if the very connectivity that you're aspiring for is hampering productivity, you have to find systems to solve it. You know? So in these developed countries, they think big, they think outside the box. And nothing wrong, in my view, in playing Trump and follow suit with them. They invent something, we follow suit. They let them Trump, and we will follow suit. And we have to learn, because it's shared experiences. The world is interconnected, and we could take shared learnings from all over the world. Inspection, vehicles inspection, very, very critical, because you cannot have TKD or totally knocked down, you weld them back in 2 parts here, and you put it on the road. In Japan, where I think the influx of foreign use vehicles, after you spend 4 years on the road in Japan, your emission quality gets so low that they abandon that, you either compress it and put it in a landfill, or you export it to the third world. Okay? So we have become the landfill sites for Japanese and Korean vehicles, you know. But it is affordable, and it is still workable. So, you know, if we manage that system properly, we can have the best of both worlds. And through you, Madam President, that is what makes the first world first. Is their systems. That is all. The systems, procedures, and the innovation, and the compliance to the law of their population. Development is not about per capita income, you know, Senator Mahabe will tell you. It is the building of institutions, having systems operating to the benefit of the people. And so in that context, Madam President, that I want to really and truly add my support to this piece of legislation. It's a small part on a long road, but I think it is a step in the right direction. Again, I want to close off by complimenting the staff at the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Minister of Works and Transport himself, and all these matters coordinated ably by the Attorney General in putting it into the form of legislation to the interests of Trinidad and Tobago. So with those few words, Madam President, I thank you.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President, for recognizing me as I make my contribution to the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment. I want to join with Senator Ramdeen and Senator Hussein in acknowledging and registering my agreement with this change to the bill, to the laws. The main issue here and the context with which the amendment is being framed has been dealt with, by and large. As a result of that, I would want to tailor my contribution to the parts that I have noted that I have not seen developed, and probably add my voice, just as Minister Khan did, to some of the things that I think are important going forward. All right. Now, it's the role of government to craft policy in an omnibus manner that would ensure a holistic approach is taken. However, given the urgency with which we require administration of a policy for speeding in Trinidad and Tobago, we can acknowledge the requirement for this piecemeal form of amendment. Now, just over 2 months prior, however, the Trinidad Express, in an article titled "Speed Limit Change Approved," got the nation excited. In fact, I have been traveling most of the time, apart from driving, and taking a taxi from Port of Spain to San Fernando. The driver would tell you the speed limit has changed since October, so we could go 100 now. However, some of them remember the speed limit is 80 when they reach the anonymous checkpoints. So, which they are very aware of, which several senators have referenced, so I won't go into that. Now, as I'm trying to get to the parts that have not been dealt with, what I listened to the Honorable Attorney General's contribution, which as always is lively. What I would want if the Minister of Transport or any person from the government bench coming after could give information regarding the methodology, because the nation has always been asking, it's a hot topic, what was the basis for arriving at the 100 kilometers per hour? We understand the limit based on the design of the roads, whether it be 110 or 120 kilometers per hour. We understand all the different limitations of the vehicles that we use, the categories, the size, the tier, etc. However, it would be good to understand what exactly was the methodology. And at this time, as we mentioned methodology, I would like to register for the record my acknowledgement of the work of the staff at the Ministry of Works and Transport and congratulate them. Myself, having worked in the public service, not as a public servant, but as a government employee in at least 3 ministries, I recognize that it's a lot of thankless work, and I want to register my thanks. However, at the same time, notwithstanding that the majority of public servants have the nation's interest at heart, I would like to bring to the attention of this House, through you, Madam President, Article titled $3,000 to buy a driver's permit, subtitled, Minister Says Corruption Can't Continue. Written by Anna Ramdas, Trinidad Express Newspapers, the 3rd of May 2017, where the writer indicated that for $3,000 TT, a person can obtain a freshly minted driver's license at any license office in Trinidad without doing the regulations or driving test. So, in an exercise of posting and mailing, you can basically post your 3,000 and your permit will be posted to you. Now, given that the majority of Trinidadians tend to understand what the minister is saying, it's alarming that in that same press conference or press briefing, the Transport Commissioner at the time, I don't know if he's still there, Mr. Wayne Richards, expressed a contrary view. In fact, he said that I'm waiting on you, the press, the member of the press, to bring the information so we could start to deal with it. So he's expressing what would give one the opinion to believe that here's what you are saying is news to me, that I'm not sure that is actually happening, and unless you bring proof, I think you should leave that alone. However, the minister directly after rebuked that and also stated for the national interest that he's going to look into it. I would like to ask the minister, at least in subsequent contributions, what exactly is being done, because that is of concern, because you may have persons who are successful in the driving test, albeit sufficient or insufficient, as Senator Hussein and Minister Khan mentioned. There are persons who have been successful in the regulations and the driving tests, and they have not been granted their permit, and they would want to know if this was just or unjust. And there are persons who may have failed, but by virtue of paying for 3,000, you don't know if they would have failed or not. They received their permits. That, to me, is a travesty, and it may also lay waste to all this work we are doing here by preparing and presenting good law for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Madam President, I would like to add my voice to some other matters, given that the majority of my contribution has been hammered by several other senators. I don't want to add that to the national report. I want to focus on issues regarding national road infrastructure and to give my spin on it. One, the tension barriers on the highway, I noted with that, and this is before I even knew I would become a senator. Why would we have these barriers down? And it gives you a sense of fright when, especially if you are going south and you are stuck in traffic. If you are stuck in traffic, it's like a car park. You can't move. And if some vehicle on some bend, for some reason, may decide to cross, or may have no choice but to cross the median because it's an accident, you and your entire life and the lives of the persons around you and the vehicles around you could be at risk. And I would like to urge and request that the Minister of Works and Transport and the Ministry of Finance sees this as a matter of urgent public interest, and whatever the cost, fix that, because we don't want us to be crying, woe is me, for reasons that could have been avoided. So that's one. There's another issue regarding the speed limits, that's the rough roads. You know, on the Solomon Ultra Highway, which happens to be the main thoroughfare from Port of Spain to San Fernando and beyond, I live Point 14, you have two patches. If the Minister of Works could note these two patches, which he probably is aware of. Shogunas. Going, if you're heading south on the southbound lane, after you pass Shogunas, the flyover, there's a rough part there by the Edinburgh 500 turn-off. Very rough. I think even if you're going at 70 kilometers an hour, you can find difficulty with maneuvering your vehicle. It's like a boat on the ocean. It's very, very rough. Then there's the Taruba stretch. On both sides, southbound and northbound side, the Taruba stretch is horrible. So if that could be addressed as well. There may be others, but I'm sure they can attend to those. But those two, to me, are very important. Now, going away from the highways of the country, again, as I say, I'm curtailing my presentation. So the main issue I would have would be the state of the main roads, all right? The old roads, as we like to say. However, the area in Trinidad where I'm from, it's not the old road, it's the only road. The road from Point 14 to San Fernando. And I know all of us here in this August House mean well, you know, and I know to err is human. Therefore, I'm extending an opportunity to a member from the other place who happens to be the MP for an area that had protests on the 30th of October this year, 2017, where there were massive protests. Now, the newspapers of the following day, the 31st of October, carried comments from the Minister of Works and Transport, the Honorable Minister, and the MP for Labrie. However, for some reason, those articles mentioned specifically the Grants Road protest, and the words politically motivated came up. Now, Grants Road, for persons who are not familiar, is a part of South Trinidad that the councillor for the area is not with the government, all right? So they mentioned Grants Road, stating that the protests were politically motivated. However, neglecting to note that one protest occurred on Grants Road, but at least 7 occurred on the main road from the junction by what they call Pepper Sauce Junction at the beginning of Rosilac, at the end of Labrie. There was one in Rosilac by the, I believe it's an Open Bible Church. There was a couple in Aripero, and there was another at South Orpuch, just before Dow Village. And I had the fortune or misfortune to be stuck in that traffic that day. I had to actually go back to Point 14 because I wasn't driving, I was traveling, and to take a taxi to Erin, from Erin to Sapari, and Sapari to San Fernando to get around the traffic. Now, when I reached at the protest, the head of the taxi association, Mr. David John, for Point 14 to San Fernando, he indicated that he couldn't get on to the MP at the time. I happened to have a contact for the councillor for the Grants Road area. So he spoke to the councillor, and he was satisfied with what the councillor was planning to do, all right, regarding the patching of the road in Grants Road. But he wanted to get onto the MP. So he subsequently, despite the fact that the MP mentioned that the protests were politically motivated, he did try to meet the MP afterwards. And he said the discussions with the MP were not fruitful. So I am encouraging the Member of Parliament for Labrie to really help the situation of our constituents. All right? The taxi drivers, and I asked Mr. John, I said, I didn't know you are a politician because your MP is saying that you are politically motivated. And he was disgusted by that claim, you know? So I'm appealing to the MP, despite the earth is human. So you can come and set the record straight and give a more empathetic response to the persons. There are taxi drivers, if you sit in their vehicles, you realize that the vehicles aren't functioning well. He shocks. There's a one driver, Mr. Matthews, he told me he entered a pothole and he burst a tire and a shock immediately. You understand? This is a man who has a couple of children to take care of, all right? And he has a family, he has a wife, he has responsibilities with a mortgage and everything. So you have persons who are affected financially, and he has to still fix his vehicle because if he stays home for the day, he loses pay. There is no pay leave. If you leave, you get no pay. You understand? Sorry, there's no paid leave.
Senator Obika, you just...
Sorry.
I'm listening very attentively to what you're presenting. I want to just remind you of the subject matter that we are debating. And I just want you to tie what you are saying to the subject matter. Okay? If you can't, then I will ask you to just move on to another point.
And I thank you for that, Madam President, because by your interjection, your very gracious interjection, it actually brings to light the connection between what I've said and the bill.
It was opportune.
So the reality is, drawing from when I mentioned on the highway, the state of the road is so bad that the speed limit may actually contribute to accidents when persons are respecting the speed limit, but the road, because of its deplorable state, may not allow you to achieve even half of the speed limit. There are speed limits in our main roads where there are no highways to service our population. And because the road network is so horrible and the neglect is so apparent, persons may even suffer the same fate. You may lose your vehicle, you may cause an accident, which may cause you to lose your life. All right? So, which is outside of the built-up areas, I'm being reminded. Now, on the same highway, another impact, so basically my presentation is focusing on the infrastructure that prevents this law from actually being effective. So the state of the road itself is one. The detention barriers, as I mentioned. And then the lighting. All right? Whilst road work is being done, there's a highway, there's a stretch from Oropuch Junction to Grants Road. All right? There's a long stretch of that highway that is without lighting, proper lighting. And the road itself is not painted well. So for someone like me who's familiar with Point 14, I would traverse that highway respecting the speed limit and be okay, may not cause an accident. But there may be someone else who is coming up or going down, and they may not be familiar with the area at all, and they can actually cause an accident by virtue of the lighting being inappropriate, inadequate, and the markings on the road surface leaving much to be desired. So that being the third point, the state regarding the lighting. I don't have much more to add at this point in time, but I want to echo some other sentiments regarding, because I know sometimes when a second voice is added to an issue, the person charged with the responsibility of effecting the change, being in this case the Minister for Works and Transport, may add a second note to it, right? So we have Senator Richards who mentioned the PTSC and issues such as the national, well, he's not here at the moment, but the national pass, all right? I think that is a viable thing. I'm someone who also uses the coach, all right? I use the bus sometimes to come from Point 14 when I don't feel the drive for 4 hours through traffic to come to Port of Spain. I would take the bus from Point straight to Port of Spain, leaving at 4:30 in the morning. I left Point 14 this morning at 4:30, but I drove, all right? And also, Senator Richards mentioned a national development plan with contingencies that could be articulated at a moment's notice to the population. That, because they found that the Lady Young was clogged when the incident on the Beetham took place, and persons couldn't get out of Port of Spain, and they weren't aware as to what are the options coming from the government. So the government should have this pre-arranged plan, just as we have contingencies with ODPM and the regional corporations. And it shouldn't be limited to the capital city, because incidents can happen wherever there are industrial areas without human intervention. It could happen for many reasons. Now, the last point I want to bring to attention would be the relationship with the press. All right, so to echo, to relay, to rehash my initial point, whatever decision cabinet makes, please inform the press that the headline should not read X. So especially to echo the sentiment of the Attorney General, the Honorable Attorney General, the headline after today's sitting should not read, speed limit approved to 100. All right? It should read that there's a final step before, I'm not a legal person, I'm a finance person, but there's a final step.
Before it's proclaimed,
before it's proclaimed, it must be proclaimed. It has to be proclaimed. Right, it has to be assented before proclaimed. Right, good. So, but the bottom line is, even if you say that, someone like me needs to be told it is not law. It is still 80 kilometers per hour. Do not go above 80. Because assented and proclaimed, that still confuses people in Trinidad and Tobago. And maybe some form of communication to the Maxi Association, the Taxi Association, so that they know what the correct speed limit is, so they don't unknowingly break the law. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Ramkissoon.
Thank you, Madam President. I could reflect with Senator Obika because I work at Point Fortin, so I drive from San Fernando to Point Fortin every single day, and I'm very much aware of every concern he raised because it is true and, in fact, very difficult where you have to choose which pothole you have to go in. And I had to upgrade my vehicle because I was driving SUV before and I damaged 2 discs in my vehicle from going into a pothole. So it is unfortunate that these are areas that are under the government. It is PNM areas, unfortunately. But nevertheless, Madam President, we are here to speak on velocity, speed, distance over time. Simple, but I like how the AG put it, it's deceivingly simple. Madam President, I really had to think twice about speaking on this piece of bill today because from driving to San Fernando to the Senate today, I do not believe the speed limit is in fact 80. I am driving 80 and there's a line of traffic to overtake me. I am like causing traffic on the highway. It's funny, but it's true. And people are on the edge of my bumper to pass me. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Stop, go on the side, go onto the shoulder? It's really like bullying. And I mean, it's not a speed limit we should really be debating. A legislator really should not be telling a man or woman how to drive your vehicle. This is something, it's aggressive driving on our nation road that is causing the traffic or the accidents. Senator Ramdi, everyone has spoken about touching stories of losing someone on our nation roads. We spend a whole hour and a half to see the accident when we pass on the highway, and right after we speed off. So pictures, billboards are not helping us deal with the fact that we need to get it under control. I am a registered engineer of Trinidad and Tobago from the Board of Engineering. I have my stamp. I am a mechanical engineer by profession. And I did learn about the engineering division from the Ministry of Transport. Now, what can an engineer tell you about the design of 110 being safe? What are the factors? Obviously, you have to make assumptions, Madam President. Assumptions that you are a what? Not aggressive driver. You have flat roads, or if you have the underlying schedule of your roadway, you would have that design factor in place. You also have a safety factor. You'll have different things you put in place, but all of these are assumptions. An engineer cannot say that Melissa could drive at 100 kilometers per hour safely. Melissa needs to know her limit. I need to know if I can go at 50 or 60 or 70. We, the legislators, are putting something in place where we say no more than 100. But I'm telling you, it's difficult to stand here before you to debate something which is being broken every single day. And I feel it feels very difficult to stand here and says, okay, I agree with 100 kilometers per hour, but you know what? When I'm going home tonight and nobody else is following it, what am I supposed to say? Coming from Senate, because this is the main time I would really use the highway, because I work in Point Forty, so there's no reason for me to come to Port of Spain other than to serve in the Senate. Leaving the Senate one night, going home, there's a car that, so again, I drive within the speed limit, so I'm my 80 driver. I am passed quickly, like I could barely see the number plates of the car that passes me. I calmly sit down and continue on my way because I am not an enforcer. Few seconds later, a whole cloud of smoke is in front of me. I see a car dancing. I don't even know if it's the same car. Again, we can't all react the same way. This car now spins around and hits the barrier, another car ends up into the drain. I called the police, and I was happy to hear that there was Operator 5 who served me, and I reported the accident. They had a few questions about if there's any fatalities. I said I'm uncertain because one car is overturned, another one, the two drivers, a guy and a lady, they're okay, but they are against the barrier. But should I have told them that you're going too fast? No. They should know what is too fast, what is too slow, what is good. You are driving a machine. So, Madam President, it really gives me a heavy heart that I have to stand here, and I'm sure the AG has so many other pieces of legislation he would want to bring that he has to come here today and speak about speed limits, which is all about aggressive driving. So, Madam President, before I do start, well, I did dive into it, but I really want to commend the Ministry of Transport. In the debate, during the debate in June, I spoke about the website. And I got a promise from the AG that it would be operationalized. And yesterday, I went onto the website, and I was able to verify Melissa Ramkissoon is a driver, and when I'm expiring. I thought it was very good that the address wasn't there. I also went further in, and I checked my vehicle registration. I had to go find my chassis number. I didn't know it by heart. And I entered it along with my number plate, and I was able to verify the name, the color of the vehicle, the model, and everything. I thought that was very, very commendable. So I must say hats off to the functioning website of Trinidad and Tobago. I do believe also this can be a measure where you can look for stolen vehicles, because I know we are thinking about having police officers with handheld devices. This is definitely a point where you could say, okay, if this is a stolen vehicle or not, because the name of the registered person is on the website page. So that's a very good measure, and I thought it was commendable to raise at this point, because I did raise it in June, and it's good to see that is being done. Madam President, I want to speak about the fact that we heard today about the statistics of approximately 500,000 licensed drivers and about 1.1 million licensed vehicles, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. So now this puts another factor into our nation roads, which leads to fatigue, which maybe can lead to aggression, because there's a lot of cars on our nation's road. I know Senator Khan just spoke about traffic management, and Senator Sinanan spoke about roundabouts. I'm surprised that Senator Obika did not speak about the amazing Point 14 roundabout. That's the only roundabout in Trinidad and Tobago that you can go left and not around. You're aware of this? That's the only roundabout I've seen that you can take a left and not go around the roundabout by RBC. So, yes, so the use of a roundabout or a traffic management system is something that you can use, but not as an aggressive driver. You're just not going to be obedient, you're not going to follow the law, and you're just not going to be aware or considerate, and you're just going to feel that you can do all things. So I was looking at this in the sense that, okay, we have a 2-to-1 ratio of cars. Now we're trying to address the speeding aspect. And the Honorable AG raised the special speed limit order. And I pulled it up when he was speaking, and I saw it really just dealt with speed limits for the different areas and different parts of the roadway. But it didn't address persons or vehicles that had special privileges to go over the speed limit. For example, police vehicles, escort vehicles. I did not even know that hearse could be escorted by police vehicles until one evening I was at Pricemar's traffic light at 8 o'clock in the night, and I'm being sped past. I'm waiting for it to turn green. They break the lights. I could have only catch the letters of the number plates, which is PCJ, a hearse being escorted. I didn't think this was a need to have that kind of level of escort, but it would be good for the citizens who have to learn from example to know who are the people, who are the agencies who are allowed to be going at 120 kilometers per hour. I can understand the president and the escort for the prime minister because it may be a security reason that they cannot be at 80, but let us know who these persons are, because it really does not set a good example. And if I think they're doing it, then why can't I do it? And if they're doing it, Madam President, well, you know what? I also am in a hurry as well. And that's the mentality that is trickling down, because we already have an area where we are driving in this level of my vehicle is designed to go 200 kilometers per hour. I want to go at 190. I'm driving a brand new vehicle. It just came out of the firm. I need to test this ability of my vehicle on a nation road. And it doesn't go with the age, unfortunately. Because you can be driving a new brand vehicle at 140, not even feel a shimmer on the steering, because it is designed for that. But we are putting a limit, and they need to have that connection of, is it safe for me to be going at 140? Maybe. But we're going to give you a ticket, and we're going to give you a ticket because this is not what our systems is designed for. Many senators have spoken about the roadway and the design. I don't know how the engineers came up with 110, because there's so much disparity, there's so many anomalies on our nation road for them to come up with a design speed. So I did even check up the RTMS system that was referenced in the introduction of the bill, and I saw that more of a management system and not really of a calculation per se to how to determine. The RTMS brought up a really good factor, which is with goods vehicles. I know Senator Shrikissoon highlighted a major factor about good vehicles, but what about good vehicles that are overloaded on our nation road? We don't have a measure how much gravel we transport in. We don't have a measure how much trucks of bricks we have, because we just see the bricks will be offloaded. Most of the time they get flat tires, maybe because they're overloaded. But we saw in the RTMS systems where there are significant risk dealing with the braking system with these overloaded vehicles. Now, that's a big point, because I'm telling you, when you're driving on a nation road, they pass you with such speed. I literally slow down really, really far away just for them to pass me and go forward, so I would not be in any risk, because you're not raising the risk of operating in our nation's roads. So in terms of the escort police, I really would like to hear who are these persons, and if they are really breaking the law, then maybe we can call the 999 when we see it. But other than that, it doesn't set a good example, and all the work that the Ministry of Transport is doing is going to be lost when you don't have these compliant agencies. So I spoke about the fatigue, the aggression. Now, what is a short-term solution that could probably readjust our culture? In Gasparilla and Point Fortin, there's a system that is used that I feel is working really well, and that is the use of the traffic warden system. They may not give you a ticket for speeding, but they help with the presence of authority. They help with parking. They also direct traffic, so we don't have a pile up. You don't have that delay when you're going into Gasparilla. They're pulling traffic off the highway. That kind of system assists drivers and don't leave you confused to try different things, to turn around in the middle of the road. You don't have that uncertainty, and that really could have helped with the driving style and really wouldn't leave that aggression. Because I recall one of my friends who works Pointe-a-Pierre, they live in Gasparilla, so that's a 10 minutes drive. They came to a training in Point Fortin, which went up to a 2-hour drive after spending about an hour on the creek. Now, Madam President, the expression today is, Melissa, I don't want to give anybody a chance because I just want to go home. And that's the level of aggression we have on our highway because people take almost 3 hours from south to Port of Spain. I know we have tried many, many measures with removing traffic lights, trying to get roundabouts, different systems, and it really is a culture change, and persons have to see something different happening, and they will conform. I want to just touch briefly on why I believe that persons or setting a speed limit is very, very tricky, because when you do defensive driving, they tell you that once per week, you're supposed to check your oil level, your washer fluid level, your tires. They say every month, you're supposed to check your automatic transmission fluid, your brake fluid, and every 6 months, your wiper blades, your tires, and your power steering. Normally, what we would do, Madam President, for your wiper blades, is wait for the noise on your glass, or for your power steering, you wait for that different feel. We have a tendency in Trinidad and Tobago, and probably many areas in the world, we use a mentality of run to fail. Yes, we change our oil regularly and we change our systems to make sure that, okay, we can operate at an optimum efficiency, because speed is related to efficiency of your vehicle. You can't have a vehicle that you just made or welded up together and want to operate it at 200. It just doesn't work. We all saw the vehicle in Valencia that split in half. So, Madam President, it is something that persons who are using their vehicles have to be mindful of. They don't have to be engineer because they're driving the vehicle, but they have to be aware of what you're using. Just like how we try to have a culture of when you're using your cell phone or social media, you have cyber crimes. It's the same mentality. When you're driving your vehicle, there is a high level of risk that you come across every single day. And you just can't say, okay, I'm at 100, I'm within the speed limit, and I'm safe. That does not work like that. Because we're not, as legislators, we're not going to say, okay, when the rain is falling, drive at 60 kilometers per hour. We're not going to tell you that. So it's a level of common sense, a level of knowing your own ability, and just a level to think differently. I believe there's one aspect that I needed to bring up today, and I have been searching many different legislation to see who addressed it best, and that is swerving. I don't know if the Honorable AG have seen this, but I've heard in Germany that if you switch lanes and you don't stay for a few seconds and you switch back lanes, you can be charged. I could not find a piece of regulations that dealt with that, but our nation roads have that. They will switch in front of you, then switch back, realize there's a vehicle coming up, so they can't make it go back onto your lane. And that is a big hazard and a risk. On the 23rd of October, my parents they were involved in an accident where a truck is speeding. They're on the slow lane. They're taking their time. They're retired, so they're taking their time. Going down the highway on a southbound lane. A truck wants to overtake them, goes onto the fast lane, realizes he can't make it, there's a car coming up and hits the back of their vehicle, Madam President. Then hits 2 vehicles in front of them and goes into the barrier. And that is a goods vehicle, truck. So you're not going to have police at every avenue and every... Yes, we have camera systems, but camera doesn't prevent. It just charges the person who has been, yes, responsible. Now, it really took a culture change, Madam President, for me to change my driving style to go to 80 kilometers per hour. And I recall when I had now got my license, I saw the sign, because I believe as a new driver, you're so aware of every single thing. And I still see the sign, but nobody is following it, so I thought it was an error. I thought those 80 kilometers signs along the roads were an error. Even the little 20 kilometers you see on the main roads, I also think those are in error as well. So it really took me a culture change. But after driving at 80, I realized I'm reaching the same place, just maybe 5 minutes more. Still not relaxed because everybody is trying to overtake me, so I feel like more of a risk on the road now. And I really feel our legislation needs to, I did not bring it up in June, so that's probably why I'm bringing it up now. The aspect of swerving on our nation roads needs to stop. You cannot overtake on the shoulder, they do it. You cannot overtake, you cannot go in front of me and go in front of another person and expect me to stop in time. It really is something that I hope can be stopped. I know there's a cry for 100, so we did our research and our homework and we said 100 is okay. I am telling the nation, the persons who are listening, maybe the persons who are listening are not the offenders, Madam President, but I am making the appeal now, putting in a public record that just because the speed limit is 100 doesn't mean that you should drive 100. Know your vehicle, know your abilities. An engineer did a design. If you drive 65, I'm telling you, they will try to run you off. I've tried it as well. It is very difficult because we have that type of everybody needs to reach first. I don't know why they're so hurried. We're now going to the Christmas season, it gets even worse. Unfortunately, Madam President, every single person has been touched by speeding and accidents. Every single person, but yet everybody feels that it would not happen to them. We have that behavior and mentality. And I would like to close by saying, as an engineer, this is a device that has been designed to be 200. You have a vehicle that's 5 years old, it is no longer designed to be 200. Okay, that's why we have the validation going on for the insurance companies, but they don't really do it very well. So you yourself need to know what you're driving. Check your brakes. Don't wait till it's screeching to know that your brake system needs to work. And the braking system is what's going to affect your speed as well. All of these things, Madam President, ties into the right speed for your vehicle. Don't feel like an odd one when you take 2 hours to reach Port of Spain, but at least you have arrived alive. So, Madam President, I do thank you for listening and taking this time to acknowledge my willingness to join this debate. I do commend the Minister of Transport for trying to make the systems work. I look forward to the barriers, charging the persons who damage the barriers accountable for that. They should fix it because it costs a lot to repair these barriers, Madam President. It's not as simple as pulling a rope. The fact that we have barriers, again, aggressive driving, if we could get that under control, definitely we would not have to waste so much of our taxpayers' dollars. So, Madam President, with that, I thank you.
Attorney General.
Taken by surprise. Thank you, Madam President. I rise with pleasure to wind up this debate. I wish to thank all honorable senators for their excellent contributions. It is a wonderful experience in a parliament which is designed on an adversarial construct to have the opportunity from time to time to just simply agree. It is a refreshing and positive experience, and I thank all honorable members for their reflections on something which I think Trinidad and Tobago is well interested in, well motivated to accepting, and which we certainly agree is past its time. But there were some very important observations made by learned colleagues which must be addressed, and if only for the perfection of the record. In a nutshell, contributions ranged from, if there is a harmony in voices without singling any contributor out specifically. 1, enforcement. 2, state and condition of our roads and the mechanisms used to ensure safety, be they the cable barriers, the railway barriers, or lights on the road, potholes and other conditions. So that's the second point. 3, the issue of corruption as it prevails in the enterprises which govern and manage the systems of Trinidad and Tobago and the road utilization of the operations of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. Apart from that, there were certain central issues raised. Senator Ramdeen touched on a very, very, very important issue which related to our coroner's courts, and he had some very genuine reflections upon that particular operation, and indeed some recommendations, which I hope to touch. And importantly, Senator Shrikissoon stood out in his submissions, which I think are reflective of the need for some further clarification. Because if Senator Shrikissoon himself made those submissions, then indeed there needs to be a bit more clarification on the issues as presented. So I thank all honourable senators for their contributions, and I hope to make a quick contribution to answer some of these concerns. Let me start with the contribution made by Senator Shrikissoon. Senator Shrikissoon raised an important interpretation question. The honourable senator pointed out in particular as he put it, the apparent or perceived conflict between the Highways Act and the amendments which we are seeking to deal with via the amendments to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. The honourable senator also made reference to regulations and there being in his mind a conflict between regulations and the law. Upon inquiry, I understood the regulations to be the driver's regulation test and not regulations in the context of subsidiary legislation, which falls under the primary legislation. The honourable senator also raised a very important position as to the MGW versus TARE categorization for the class of vehicles which we seek to treat with by an amendment to the second schedule, and that is, of course, in moving from 2,540 kilograms to 3,200 kilograms. Those are the 3 points that I took away. There are a few other points. So permit me to clarify the position, if I may. In piloting the measure before us, I started off by pointing honourable senators to the provisions of Chapter 4850. In particular, the effect of understanding how this speed limit change was going to work. I had reference to Section 62 of the Act. In Section 62 of the Act, in subsections 1 through 8, there is the mechanism as to how we go about changing the law. In summary, Section 62 allows for, number 1, the definition of built-up versus outside of built-up areas. Section 62 also allows for reference to a speed limit, which is set out in the second schedule to the Act. Section 62 allows for the ability to have special limits, speed limits inserted as they relate to information coming out of the Transport Division itself. Section 62 also allows for the application of how the law is to be changed, and that's specifically in Section 62.7, where we say that if you want to change the speed limit, you have to, in the current law, move the Parliament by way of affirmative resolution to actually change the second schedule. Senator Shrikissoon pointed out, and he asked for clarification, because in his submission to the Honourable Senate, he said, look, I can't see how this thing is going to work. You've had a look, the Honourable Senator said, to the speed limit orders, etc. So permit me to clarify in this manner. What's before us is the only thing that we can change at present. There's a process to enforcing this law in the context of what we're discussing. The first thing we must do in the primary law, which causes us to move the whole Parliament to do it, pursuant to Section 62.7, we must amend the second schedule. That's the primary law. For us to change the speed limit, which is set out in the second schedule, we have to call the whole Parliament together, and if we follow the existing law, we would have an affirmative resolution that we change the second schedule. That was open to us. In it, we would change 65 to 100, or we would change 35 to 65, or we would change the classification of 3,200 kilograms moving up from the 2,540 kilograms. That's what we would do. However, what would happen on the next occasion is that if we were to adjust the speed limit anywhere in a built-up area, anywhere in an outside a built-up area, or if we were to modify the classification of vehicles specified in the second schedule, we'd have to move the Parliament again by affirmative resolution. So what the government did is to bring a bill which says, look, from henceforth, we will no longer ask the Parliament to move itself to affirm a resolution of the Parliament. What we will do is allow the minister to do it by way of order. We'll amend the second schedule now, but we're going to change section 62(7) to allow the minister in the future to simply do it by way of order, therefore harmonizing the law, because it is open to the minister under section 62(2) of the Act to publish special orders for speeds in special areas. So right now, we had, on the one hand, speed limit being done by affirmative resolution in section 62(7), and you had to do that by way of moving the Parliament. And on the other hand, in section 62(2) of the same Act, you could deal with special limits by way of order, simply. So the two were not in harmony. So we sought to harmonize these two. Simply put, from henceforth, if this law passes through the Senate and His Excellency the President is invited to assent to the law, we'll do everything by way of order. Special speed limits, second schedule amendments, all by order. The second thing is, we actually moved away from the current law. So the current law in relation to how you are to treat with speed limits is set out by a combined interpretation of the second schedule of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, and also by way of reference to the special speed limits orders, and by way of reference to what is going to be built up or not built up. Those are the three things you do to know which road you could drive on at which speed. Because Senator Shrikissoon asked in his three things of clarification, 3 items of clarification that he wanted. He wanted to know, Senator Richards joined him, how do you know which road you drive on what? And of course, all the corollary items, who puts up the signs, do the signs tell you what you can do? All of those things are contained. Because the existing law tells you, you can be charged for driving in excess of a speed along a particular roadway, but it is a defense, I think it is 62(4), for you to say, well, there was no sign on the road, and therefore I did not know that that could be the case. So, 3 things to tell you which road, which speed, what time. 1, the second schedule of the parent act. 2, the special speed limits order. 3, what is built up or non-built up as is defined within the meaning of section 62, which says you should do that by way of order. Remember, the parent law said initially, section 62(8), the following areas are built-up areas: Port of Spain, San Fernando, Arima, or any other place or borough, so described by way of order. So, 2 orders and the second schedule. What we did is that we've moved away from the 1979 position, to tell you where you can drive. Also, the 1969 position telling you the speed in the second schedule. These positions told us in the speed limits built up areas order, which is a 1979 order, it said this. This order may be cited as a speed limits built up area order. The roads or portions of roads specified in the schedule are hereby declared to be built up areas for the purposes of section 62. So in 1979, the government of Trinidad and Tobago then, the laws of Trinidad and Tobago then, described what is a built-up area in this order. And they described built-up areas across several paragraphs of law, 59 paragraphs in total. So for example, item 59, all roads in the island ward of Tobago are built-up roads in a built-up area. All roads lying within a radius of 2 kilometers of a police station in Orapooch, that's a built-up area. Clark Road in the county of St. Patrick and all roads lying within a radius of 5 kilometers of the penal station. That's a built-up area. The Diego Martin Main Road, the Saddle Main Road, the Long Circular Road, Beetham Highway from its intersection with Wrightson Road in the vicinity of the Central Market to the NP flyover. Those are examples of what were described in law, it's the current law of what is built up. What we are migrating to after this law is passed, because remember, the only thing that we can do now is to amend the schedule, the second schedule, change it from affirmative resolution and put it to be by order, and then we publish orders afterwards. And what we are going to do next, as soon as the law is ready for assent, if it's passed, we will then table up 2 orders. One will be an order to replace what I just read. So we will replace the 1979 speed limits built-up area order. What we will do is we will amend that by saying the speed limit in built-up areas is going to be amended. We're no longer going to describe all roads that are built up. What we're going to say is all roads in Trinidad and Tobago are built up. All. Every last road in Trinidad and Tobago is built up except the following. And the roads that are not going to be built up are described as follows. The Beetham Highway from 1.53 kilometer mark at Market Overpass in the vicinity of Central Market to 4.81 kilometer mark at Barataria Overpass. I'm just giving you what it will be. Churchill-Roosevelt Highway, and then it gives certain distances. Uriah-Butler Highway gives distances. Solomon-Hochoy Highway. Solomon-Hochoy Highway from another mark to Golconda. Audrey-Jeffers, Diego Martin Highway, Eastern Main Road, South Trunk Road Extension, Claude Noel Highway, Shirvan Road from Claude Noel Highway to Grafton Road, Bucco Bay, Rienzi Curtin Highway, etc. from Rushwood Street to Sipera Road. Those are going to be the roads within specific markers that are going to be outside of a built-up area. Everything else in Trinidad and Tobago is going to be outside, sorry, it's going to be inside a built-up area. These things mentioned will be outside a built-up area. On these roads mentioned, you can drive at 100 kilometers per hour. You can drive at 65 kilometers per hour. You can drive at 35 kilometers per hour, etc., depending upon whether you are a tractor, a bus, a goods vehicle, etc. So the classes now tell you which roads you can drive that in. Senator?
Thanks. Thank you, Honorable Attorney General. Honorable Attorney General, I'm following you, but what I'm understanding is, like the example you use, Rienzi Curtin Highway from Rushwood Street to Sipera Road will be defined as a non-built-up area, and therefore, but that's the road that has 3 or 4 schools along it.
Let me finish.
Sure.
Right.
So,
I'm coming to the next layer, which will explain those things. So the general position is built up, outside of built up. What the government is doing next is to then modify the speed limits built up area. Sorry, we're going to modify the special speed limits amendment order. What we have done is to then issue out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pages of specific ramps, roads, secondary roads, intersections, and merges, because the issue of how one merges was described and asked to be factored. Senator Shrikissoon, you yourself, through you, Madam President, raised this issue. And specifically, in this special speed limits order is where we factor how you merge, onto which road, at what speed, in which location, between start point and end point. And for example, that incredibly mad interchange that we have in San Fernando called the cross-crossing interchange, that it takes you several times, it's like a ride in a park, where you have to take it on several loops to make sure you're going on the right road, for those of you who don't know San Fernando. But it's like a scale electric truck. in the old days, for those of you who still remember what scalextric is. But along the, I know Senator Sinanan knows that well, but anyway, along the cross-crossing interchange loop L1 off-ramp, it's 20 kilometers per hour. Interchange loop L2, 20 kilometers, L3, 20 kilometers, etc. On the another ramp, the Corinth ramp, it'll be 30 kilometers. On Monroe Road flyover ramp, it'll be 40 kilometers. So what the Ministry of Works and Transport did, it went to the Highways Division, it went to every single ramp, name, number, design specification, engineering specification. It factored centripetal forces, centrifugal forces. It factored the traffic load analysis, occupancy analysis, and then it came up with these recommended positions of desired speed versus engineered speed to try and create that harmonious relationship so that we would not have too much of a negative impact upon platonic movement of vehicles across highways, across ramps, across secondary roads. It's that platonic movement which must become harmonious between engineered speed and desired speed. And for the record, that platonic movement was measured using historical data, which is the RTMS system. And for Senator Ramkissoon's benefit, that RTMS system actually was data which ended at 2013 because the system broke down at 2013. But we had historical data. It was not cost effective then to repair it, and so it was left alone. But what was done was not only the number of cars that passed. It was the average speeds, the average occupancy, the total volume, the average hourly volume. And then data at current basis was taken so that we would do it by way of spot analysis on the same parameters just described. So far from Senator Hossein's... Yes, please.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 14.5, I beg to move that the Senate continue to sit until the completion of the business at hand.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the Senate continue to sit until the completion of the business at hand. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Senate will continue to sit until the completion of the business at hand. Continue, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. May I ask what time I'm due to complete? Official time?
At 6 minutes past 8.
Thank you. I promise not to be that long. So, far from the submission that this was a populist request, this was not a populist request. What this was, well, I perhaps shouldn't say that that is true. It is true that the population reacted negatively to the imposition of the existing law, but when one describes it as a populist reaction, a reaction to populist demand, it can betray the level of scrutiny and the empirical data which was used to drive the informed change of position. But it is true that a number of people in society complained. To stick a pin and to throw a little humor into the Senate, I recall vividly when I was in Barbados at the University of the West Indies studying law. I was a religious karateka, would always go to my karate classes, and I recall being at the dojo one day, and this fellow came in, a Trinidadian fellow, large fellow I used to spar with, and he was blue vexed, angry. So I said to him, well, what had happened to you? I asked him, what had happened to you? Huffing and puffing and upset. So I said, well, look, what happened? He said, look, can you believe they stopped me on the road for speeding? So I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I was only traveling at 160 kilometers per hour. So I stopped and I looked at him, I said, this is Barbados. The road doesn't allow you to even travel at 160 kilometers per hour because you run out of road. And secondly, they actually enforce the laws. But so lost was he as an average Trinidadian to the fact that there was a speed limit, people enforced the speed limit, and that the speed limit is not as fast as you can go. That was very symptomatic of Trinidad and Tobago. So in that populist demand, Trinidad and Tobago did, of course, complain about the imposition of the existing law, the special speed limit. But I don't want for one moment for us to be betrayed that there wasn't empirical consideration, empirical data considered in the production of this recommendation for a new speed limit. To address a concern raised by Senator Ramkissoon, I can certify that the roads so described as ready for 100 kilometers per hour are those roads which are designed, number one, within the capacity of an engineering recommendation, having shoulders, having 3-meter chain links, having design parameters which allow for 125 kilometers per hour. And that the 100 kilometers per hour is the desired harmonized speed ratio between 125 and the 110 and the 80. 110 is where we found most people driving at if they tried to obey the law. Perhaps those very people who were riding your bumper whilst you drove at 80 kilometers per hour up the road today. Yes, please.
Thank you for giving me. Are these engineering analysis of persons, are they local engineers? Are they consultants?
Sure. I am very proud to say that they are local. They are based upon recommendations coming from the Ministry of Works and Transport, but they also included reference to international specifications. So there's a design engineering handbook, forgive me, I can't remember it offhand, and the international position was factored against the local position, but our Ministry of Works and Transport, and the transportation in particular, have excellent people on board that have been doing this job for a very long while and are well accustomed to this. But this exercise of making a recommendation for a change of a speed limit really came about because of a whole analysis of the road conditions of Trinidad and Tobago, which takes me to a common theme: enforcement. What's the point of us talking all of this if you're not going to enforce the law? What about those people that bullet past you? What about those so-called special conditions for people who are allowed to break the speed limit? No, the law is the law is the law. It is the question as to who is enforcing the law and who then seeks exceptions in respect of the law. Ambulances, for instance, have to stop at a red light, but they may break the red light when it is safe to do so, and the courts are replete with decisions to that effect. So the position that came about from the inspection of the roads and the engineering, factoring, etc., brought us to the very excellent question of enforcement. Now, it's an admission that the approach that we're taking is a layered approach, not a piecemeal approach. I want to take away that expression. We're not engaged in piecemeal legislation. We are engaged in layered approaches because, number one, it must be such as it can be digested in terms of the issues before the Houses of Parliament and the population. And number two, we are operationalizing at the same time. I want to assure Trinidad and Tobago that enforcement ties in to anti-corruption. Enforcement ties in to policing. Enforcement ties in to capacity in the courts of Trinidad and Tobago and licensing division. Enforcement ties in to data analysis. Enforcement ties in to use of technology in addition to use of persons. And what the government of Trinidad and Tobago is recommending and is implementing, as in my piloting, I went through some of the deliverable milestones that we were obliged to meet to operationalize our red traffic light camera enforcement and our demerit point system, etc. In doing this inspection of engineering analysis, etc., and in laying the spot speed bill, which is now on this order paper, so without breaching the rule on anticipation, I won't go too far into that. But what I can say, we have earmarked every light pole, every bridge, every ramp, primary roads and secondary roads, because Senator Ramley made a very powerful point. It seems that we're only enforcing the law on the highways. And it is the secondary roads or rural communities, as he put it, or rural areas that seem to fall prey to accidents and fatalities of the tragic kind that we've seen. That is why, bearing in mind the human resource difficulties we have, we will be installing spot speed cameras on appropriate location poles, on bridges, on pathways, in rural, in urban communities, in built-up and in outside of built-up areas. And that use of technology is to be layered with the use of the RFID identification plates so that you actually can monitor the condition of your road users, not only in their velocity, but in allegations of criminality. Is a getaway car found at this location? Did the tag buzz under this arch? It gives crime fighting a better chance. And in dealing with enforcement and in tying into the observations made by Senator Hussain, we had the issue of corruption at the licensing office. And Senator Sinanan, in his public statements, has said, as has the Prime Minister, as have I, as have many members of the government, corruption is the #1 issue in our country. Be it what one calls innocent corruption, VIP complex, let me label it that. You know someone who could get it done for you faster. You know someone who could take a little small thing to get the thing done. A license, registered copy of your motor vehicle registration. Your license, the Anna Ramdas story of May 2017, which spoke to $3,000 for a driver's license. All of these things, Senator Hussain was correct in making those observations, which is why the automation in the Ministry of Works and Transport licensing division, where we have completed data entry and we're driving it not only so that you have your data, but so that you can conduct your transactions in a cashless environment, and where it is associated to user PINs, personal identification numbers on your birth certificates and your marriage certificates and your certificates of citizenship, etc., have meaning in our country. We've just never used them before. And so what we are doing, and this Parliament will be brought into the loop very shortly, we are tying in the data which we have that has been left in what I call, and I borrowed it from someone, so it's not my own paternity, cylinders of excellence. Very excellent cylinders with perfect information. They're just not talking to the next area. Left hand does not know what the right hand is doing. And what we're doing is we're harmonizing the data. And this data is also being harmonized into the National Operations Center, which already has license plate identification technology. Trinidad and Tobago, let me say that again. The National Operations Center, from any camera which is tied into it, which is going to be all cameras, can already identify every license plate that is picked up. That's a fact. Tie that into driver's permits, tie that into vehicle registration, and now you're talking about Trinidad and Tobago sobering itself up into truly dealing with crime fighting. You see, we have not paid as a society any attention to our systems, where the Ministry of Finance knows what its balance of accounts looks like on a daily basis, where the judiciary and the magistracy knows what its caseload looks like from a computerized system. These things did not exist. Senator Ramdeen raised a very important point, which dealt with the coroner's courts. I am very pleased to say that the government is well on track to the amendments that Senator Ramdeen reflected on. In fact, we intend to approach the Parliament to deal with the creation of a criminal division. Honorable senators will remember we created a family and children division of court. We harmonized the High Court jurisdiction with the summary court jurisdiction. We dealt with certain things. Well, the same thing is coming in relation to the criminal division, so that we can actually improve the administration of justice, and in particular, in the special courts which are to come there, in the proper management of the coroner's inquests, which take far too long and cause savagery to the emotions of people who have to relive the experiences once, twice, thrice, over and over again, each time they come to have the tragedy brought to the fore all over again. There are just a few more points I'd like to touch on, Madam President. Senator Shrikissoon raised the issue of Section 50 in the Highways Act. The Highways Act, Chapter 4801, was a consolidation of laws in the 1970s, which treated with basically how we would create highways, monitor highways, improve highways, how we would take private roads into public roads, and the definition of a highway so included.
Honorable, through you, Madam President, Honorable AG, it was the Section 50 of 4850,
I know,
not 4801.
Sorry, thanks. You're correct. It was Section 50, which is the classification of driving permits under Part 4 of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, and the reference was whether there was a conflict with respect to the definition of how we treat with roads under this amendment that we're proposing as against the Highways Act, which described any highway as all roads. So you made reference to the definition of highways under Chapter 4801. You then said that this law appeared to be colliding with highways because a highway could be any road. And in dealing with the submission as I have, in explaining how Section 62 of this Act in operation, amending second schedule, utilization of new orders to amend built-up areas and special speeds, we're not actually dealing with the Highways Act, which was a law designed for a different purpose, how we bring private roads into quote-unquote, the road systems of public users where the state pays for and maintains those roads at state expense. So this law is not intended to traverse or to be read alongside with the Highways Act. The only law that speaks with speed limits, where speed limits are to be applied, how they're to be applied, is the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, under Section 62 of the Act, under this part where Section 62 falls, and that specifically deals with offenses. Senator Shrikissoon raised as well the concept of Section 50 of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. But Section 50, which sets out the categorizations of driver's permits, because that's the section it falls under. That part of the law, Section 50 must be read with that part of the law. It treats with the classification of driver's permits, whether you are class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motorbike, class 1. Class 3, ordinary vehicles. 4, 5. I think the one person in here that has multiple, more than 3 or 4 classifications is probably Senator Saddam Hosein. But the point is, classification of driver's permits is not to be read with the MG, is to be read with the speed limit points. There are not 2 laws that apply. It's only going to be 1 law. Let's deal with the issue of the MGW, the motor vehicle gross weight, and deal with tear. I understand the point that the Honourable Senator Shrikissoon was making, but I want to put it this way. The maximum gross weight, the MGW, sorry, I said it wrong earlier, the maximum gross weight is the weight when fully loaded. The tear or unladen weight is the weight when it's not loaded. So when we say 3,200 kilograms, that's the maximum load. So we specifically intend that the class of vehicle, including those small trucks that have MGW weights at 3,200 that can hold a ton, that's intended to move at the speed limit that we're now prescribing, because that MGW is designed that way. It is the tear weight, because the Honourable Senator, if I understood what was being said, cautioned, look, you've got 3,200, what happens if it has a ton on it? That is now something moving, mass times acceleration. Acceleration is factored by mass. It's directly proportional to the mass in terms of ratio. And therefore, you are raising the point of what happens if the mass is increased. Therefore, you are moving potentially into a dangerous zone. But the MGW is such that that is the actual amount. And in fact, the law prescribes in regulations that, you remember Senator Mahabir raised it in a previous debate, having to write MGW and tear weight in white letters on the right-hand side of a vehicle in no more than 65 millimeters on a black background. And we were reflected on it in a previous debate saying that that seemed to be archaic, etc. But that's the law. You have to have specified on the vehicles the MGW and the tear weight. And we specifically accept out now the use of trailers. That's why, in fact, the bill is amended from the House of Representatives. We recognize in the amendment that came in the House that we were unwittingly treating with a class of vehicles which had trailers associated with them that we would have, if the bill was unamended in the House, it would have allowed for something which is much heavier and shouldn't be moving at that speed to move at that speed. And so we adjusted the bill in the House of Representatives. So there are not two classifications of speed. You don't have to jump out of the car and look to see if your MGW applies. It's not to be read in reference to Section 50 of the Act, because Section 50 of the Act treats with your class of permit, not your moving speed, which only the second schedule of the parent law and the special speed limits orders and built-up area orders actually manage. We already had clarification for the record from the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport that there is specific attention being paid to the railing systems, to the cable systems on the highways, and that has been a matter of trying to get value for money, because we are, face it, as we must, in a serious financial situation. Members will know from just a cursory glance in the media that paying students' fees on time by scholarship winners, that paying public servants at time, that these require a lot these days. On Monday, yesterday, I had to perfect 2 bonds for over $1 billion each to make sure that we could pay public servant salaries in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm given the assurance by the Minister of Works and Transport that this is something that is a high priority item and will be attended to. I thank honourable senators for raising it. I'm told by the Minister of Public Utilities, specifically in relation to T and Tech, that we are at best able to deal with repairing about 50,000 lights, street lights per year. There are 350,000 street lights in Trinidad and Tobago, and on any 1 year, at best that we can achieve is 50,000 street lights in repair. Now, I heard Senator Obika say something which I wish was a reality. Whatever the cost, just do it. Trinidad and Tobago is not in that financial position right now. I don't say that to say anything other than the economic condition of this country is in a terrible state, but there is immense hope because we're coming out of it very nicely. And one of them treat with the observation on road conditions in Point Fortin and the statements which implore the Honourable Member for Point Fortin, Major General Dillon, to speak to taxi drivers who the Honourable Senator Obika said were being put into a political environment. I don't want to be negative in this debate, but I just want to remind the country. The highway to Point Fortin wasn't $1 billion in costs, or $2 billion in costs, or $3 billion in costs, or $4 billion in costs. How much was it? $7 billion and counting.
Attorney General, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll make this one quick. So much for not using all my time. It was $7 billion and counting. It was built out of the exchequer of Trinidad and Tobago. It was not on international financing. And I say that because when you take the rubric of an IDB loan or other sort of loan, there are certain matrices in place, which if they were utilized, would have resulted in us not seeing variations in the contract, which did not allow us to fire OAS for going into bankruptcy when there were changes to the addendums to the contract. And very importantly, which tripped us, but fortunately we succeeded in recovering close to $1 billion out of that OAS contract. And I want to say this. The reason, and I'll put it in a very constructive way, the reason why we still have potholes in Trinidad and Tobago, the reason why we have railway barriers that are not complete, or railings or cables that are not complete, or we have blown lights that are causing us jeopardy, as Senator Ramdeen correctly reflected upon, is because this country, for years, not just in the last 5 years, when the UNC was in power, not just then, I may say more at another point when the mood changes, but for years our country has been engaged in a lack of value for money appreciation. And with every little nickel and dime that is scraped and saved in ensuring value for money, in every bit of scrutiny applied to making sure we save $1 here, it means that we can spend $1 there. And the Honorable Minister of Works and Transport, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Trade, the ministries are in a combined effort to save money. And I ask for us in Trinidad and Tobago to cut our cloth appropriate to our budget. We have to remember that a call to sobriety is what is required in our country. We will get through it. We can get through it. The beautiful thing about an austere environment is that everybody learns that the situation is one which we have to grapple with. It isn't, Senator Obika, most respectfully, that whatever the cost, just spend it. The days for that in Trinidad and Tobago are over, but I take your point on the most positive end. We must prioritize expenditure. And I agree with you that the priority of expenditure is a critical item. Madam President, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate in the Senate today. Even though there's a right of audience, it is still a pleasure and a privilege to be in this honorable chamber. I enjoyed the contributions of honorable senators all present. I thank the Honorable Senate for its attention. We are, of course, open-minded to any further observations in committee stage, and I beg to move.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850.
Attorney General.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 66-1, I beg to move that the bill be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the bill be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Senate shall now go into committee of the whole to consider the bill clause by clause.
Clause 1.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 1 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 1 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 2.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part of the bill.
Madam Chair, Clause 2.
Yes?
Yes. Clause 2, I have some concerns. I did not participate in the debate because I did not catch your eye in time. But really, I do have some concerns with F, G, and H in the schedule, in the second schedule. You see, Honorable Attorney General, all three of them, F, G, and H, are carrying a speed limit of 100 kilometers outside of a built-up area. So we are equating them as being identical with respect to risk to the population. With respect to F, we are dealing, and it's a question similar to what Senator Shrikissoon has raised, where the MGW does not exceed 3,200 kilograms. Can you give the assurance that the Ministry of Transport will be having weighing mechanisms so that they can weigh vehicles, small pickup trucks, so that pickup trucks going at in excess of 3,200 kilometers, going at in excess of 100 kilometers per hour, are not in excess of this MGW of 3,200? Because I am not aware at this time of whether the Ministry of Transport is in the process of weighing. I also have a concern with G as well, but first F.
Madam Chair, if I could address the concern. It's important to understand what the licensed MGW is versus being overladen. The licensed MGW is done at the time of licensing. At the time of licensing, the MGW is recorded, and that is the vehicle at its maximum gross weight. That is the specified amount, that is the maximum amount. So if you have a, so in respect of the licensing point, the MGW is certified. If you have a 6-passenger car, it's with 6 passengers on an average of X weight for the passengers, taking into account what the trunk space utilization may be, etc. The issue of being overburdened, something which is in excess of what your MGW is or your tear weight is, because if it is a goods vehicle, as the schedule describes in E, in the old law, right? So goods vehicle, the license MGW of which, right? In a goods vehicle, you not only have the MGW, you have the tear weight. You must have the two, pursuant to the regulations. The point of weighing stations is a feature which not only exists right now, but is one which is to be expanded by the ministry. And I'll tell you why. It has to be expanded because our secondary roads are being cannibalized and slaughtered by heavy containers and goods in excess using these roads when they're not supposed to use these roads. And therefore, the ministry and the people of Trinidad and Tobago constantly have to pay to fix. There was an excellent submission about utilization of roads at particular hours. I can't remember if it was Senator Ramlin or Senator Richards who raised the point. That is something which the ministry is also looking at now. So what I can say, there's a distinction between licensing at the point of licensing for MGW and tear weights. The issue of overburdening is currently something which is treated with under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. The ability to enforce it by way of weigh stations is something which exists in not as many locations as we would like, but it's something which we're looking to expand right now.
Yeah, thank you very much, AG. I have another substantive issue, and this is with respect to, in the second schedule, G. G says a private motor car with a trailer has a maximum speed limit of 100 km, and any motor vehicle, other motor vehicle, has the same 100. But what I did not get clear, yes.
F, which is now G,
yes,
private motor vehicle with trailer, where specifically, that's the amendment we had in the House.
Right.
We took that out.
Okay,
so that's not going to be 100. That will still be at the lesser rate.
Yes.
It is only any other motor vehicle without a trailer that will be moving at the 100.
So it's any, I need to get it clear, because what I have before me it probably is different from what you are now telling me.
So a private motor vehicle, a private motor car with trailer.
Yes.
The only thing we do to that line in the old second schedule is we change the letter F to G.
Okay, so it remains at 65.
It remains at 65.
Very well, thank you very much.
So the question is that clause 2 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 2 now stands part of the bill. Honourable Senators, the question is that the bill be now reported to the Senate. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be reported to the Senate.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to report that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, was considered in committee and was approved without amendments. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report pursuant to Standing Order 69-1.
Honourable Senators, the question is that this Senate agree with the committee's report on a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Madam President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, be now read a third time and passed. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that this Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, December 5th, 2017 at 1:30 p.m. That will be Private Members' Day, and it's my information from the acting leader of the opposition bench that we'll be debating the motion number 3 listed under Private Members' Business.
Honourable Senators, before I put the question on the adjournment, leave has been granted for a matter to be raised on the motion for the adjournment of the Senator. Senator Ramkissoon, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. The matter I have highlighted for this evening is the need for the government to cause an assessment to be conducted of the South Arapooch Road alongside the Mosquito Creek to determine its integrity following the recent floods experienced in the area. Madam President, it was recent because I laid this November the 3rd, 2017. Today is the 28th, so almost a month later. Recent meaning these floods occurred on the 18th of October, 19th of October, 20th, 21st, 22nd. Madam President, since I have laid this since November the 3rd, I would hope that the Minister can share today some factual findings on the structural integrity of the Godino Bridge and the roadway, as we have a local registered structural integrity engineers from the Board of Engineering. We have registered civil engineers and we have asset integrity engineers. So we know that this roadway along to the creek is a construction site. The given completion date was February 2018. I do not know if this date still stands, and I would hope the Minister can share the new expected completion date for this highway to Point Fortin. I would like to jog all memory, because it is some time ago, that on Diwali Day, the 19th of October, the rain started. On the 20th of October, which was a Friday, we all proceeded to work, normal working day, but the rain was still falling. I passed on my journey from San Fernando to Point. There was water on the creek, but however, that was due to the clogged drains and the non-functioning pump alongside the creek road. So we were able to pass. The traffic was passable and we were able to pass. The rain did continue, unfortunately, which led to when we are attempting to come back or return home on this Friday afternoon on the 20th of October, which I could remember because it was my birthday. I'm returning home 4 p.m., a little bit before, I left a little before, and I could not reach the Godino Bridge. This was very, very hopeless day because I took almost an hour to get to the Arapooch roundabout. in traffic from the, I don't even know what you call that, bend before the fishing bay to the Urapooch, or Tahiti, thank you, to the roundabout. It took me an hour. I then decided, okay, I'm going to go through the field road through Faizabad and make all the rounds to go through Woodland, which was a big error because Woodland was flooded. I did not know this. There was no alerts, no bulletins. We just had social media, but you have the hope that the rains would have subsided. I mean, the floods would have subsided and I could have passed. I drive a very high vehicle, so I thought I could have gone through. But there were some residents, not even officials or police or fire, nobody, but residents with tractors, with their tall boots, assisting members of the public and telling you don't pass there, turn around or go through some road in Penal. And I remember from seeing on social media, Penal was flooded. So I did not go through that route. Now this is myself alone in a vehicle, trying to get from work to home. And this is one of the reasons I'm raising this. I was not going to raise it because I said it's a construction site. But after the feeling, the level of hopelessness that afternoon, because I'm not only a citizen, but I'm a member of public service or public office, a senator, and not seeing any assistance to the residents or to the citizens or to the persons who are accessing this road. This is a work day, a Friday afternoon. They said it was flooded. The rains were falling all day. There was speculation that there was water on the creek from lunchtime, but you're thinking it's a few inches of water you can drive through. I did not know that the water was as high as the barrier, which is about 2 feet high. How am I supposed to know that? Thank God, because after going through Woodland, getting blocked, turned around again and went back into the queue to get to the creek, so that now is turned into 3 hours driving for me alone. Sitting in here now in this lineup, call some of my coworkers. They're also stuck in the traffic to realize we don't know what's happening. We just know there's water on the creek. So there's one passageway is blocked with traffic, another passage is blocked with water. Okay, no problem. We're just hearing there's water. Thank God people who are going to south or going to Point Fortin area, they're driving towards that area, they stop to tell you. Thank God for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for being so heartfelt that they stopped and tell you, people have shut down in your lane and they're blocking you, so you have to wait. How am I supposed to know that? What am I supposed to do? I'm just sitting here waiting. Thank God it's not Ibitam or any of these rural. We are in a very safe area, South. Thank God for South people being law-abiding citizens. We didn't have the fear of being robbed, but now it's coming into darkness. It is 8 o'clock and I'm still not home. Thank God I turned around and I went by a friend, but I attempted to cross the creek 2 a.m. in the morning, and there was my van tire was covered of water. The water was at the level of the barrier. Now, why am I raising this issue? This was like a natural disaster for us. This was an emergency. Why was there no police to direct or tell us what is going on? Why couldn't we get persons to park up their vehicles by any of the police stations or even in the new passageway, the barrier, the highway, the new area? We could park by the creek and we could have used a bus to get across the creek. Some kind of measure could have been a short-term measure because some of us just wanted to get home. It's not like we went voluntarily to line. We went to work. We want to return home. There's no help. The only police vehicle I saw was one escorting a crane, right? And they didn't even stop to tell you, okay, well, ma'am, something is happening. They have no concern. They're just driving on because their job is to escort the crane. I tell you, citizens had to help other citizens. No assistance from the public authority. So what I'm trying to get at, what is the integrity of the road? Now we are a month later, we're driving on the same road, the potholes are larger. We know that there was a report of a 30-foot crack on the roadway. I also know that the road has now caved. The potholes have enlarged. Yes, there's a risk now because on the 23rd of October, there was accident, there was the 4th of November, there was a tree-car accident at 4 p.m. On the 5th of November, 10:30, 8 p.m., there was a car that hit a lamppost. On the 18th of November, 12:46, a van ran off the road. 24th of November, 1 p.m., a car hit from behind. 25th of November, 5 p.m., another accident. So there have been issues, even though they're under Senator Obika, during his debate, he spoke about the roadblocks. On the 30th of October, they blocked the roads for the condition of the roads. My thing is, do we have an evacuation plan for these areas that when you're blocked for persons who are not living in the area to get home? Is there anything that exists such as like that for citizens who are in flood-prone areas? Is there any kind of agency equipped to set up a plan in light of these weather conditions? Because we're knowing that we're going into the rainy season, we expect a larger rainfall. What is the ministry, or what is the alternative plans being set up for motorists in the short-term measure for these high risks involved in driving through flooded waters? Because you know it's thank you. With the budget, there's a water management and flood control program for $2.9 million. Madam President, we want to know what plans or what can assist us to know what is the integrity of these roads. And the bridge also was it was flooded. There was water on top or below the bridge. They're not designed to operate like that, the weight and everything like that. So, Madam President, I'm bringing this matter because we're driving on the road and we don't know what to expect next. I don't want to say I was privy to all this information and a vehicle end up in the sea or helpless or something. There's children, parents accessing these roadways, and I feel like I'll be a disheart to my country if I did not raise this at this time. So thank you for giving me these opportunities. For the few seconds I have, I really would like to hear something from the Minister of Transport. Thank you.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam President, based on the motion before us today, which seeks to establish whether there is need for the government to cause an assessment to be conducted on the South Approach Road along the Mosquito Creek to determine the integrity following the recent flooding experience in the area, I am compelled to respond once again to this Honorable Senate on the concerns expressed. In my response to this motion, I will attempt to show and to ensure the population that the roadway is sound. Madam President, the Mosquito Creek is located between the Paria Suite and the Gordino Bridge in the southwest part of Trinidad and Tobago. I prepared for the motion of the condition of the road, but I understand why you went into flooding, and a significant part of your contribution was based on the flooding. So I will want to go into the flooding on that specific day. Madam President, what happened on that day? We got a significant amount of rainfall. And in the Oropuch area, two rivers breached the bank, the Newcut Channel and the Oropuch River. What happened on the creek is that normally water would come either from the rain or from the sea, because of the location. If they have a spring tide, and around that, I think that day was the spring tide, which is probably the highest tide that we get for the year. What we found is that water was coming from the rain, significant amount. We were getting water from the sea, and water was also coming from the two breaches that we had. So there's no way the pumps, on that day we had 3 pumps operating on the creek. Normally we have 2. On that day we brought in a 3rd pump. But that volume of water, there's no way this pump could take that water out. So that is the cause of the flooding on that day. It was just not a normal day. And with the breach, the water was coming through the mangrove. I think it's probably the first time they saw that volume of water coming through the mangrove. It was because of the breach of the 2 rivers. So that would have accounted for the flooding on that day. But Madam President, let me get back to the road. We're all aware it's a construction site. And that phase of the highway is not one of the packages that work have started on. The bridge the work have started on, but that roadway is supposed to be coming out for tender within the next month. That is probably the most technical part of the highway to be completed, because that part of it goes through the Mosquito Creek area where we have to surcharge the road. And that is why that is taking such a long time. But my understanding through NITCO is that that phase is going to be tendered out by, if not by the end of December, by the first week in January. So we expect within a couple of months that work on that creek to be started. Once that is started, the plan is to bring the existing road 1.2 meters higher than the wall. So we expect that to be the end of flooding on the creek. Because if you look at where they're surcharging it, it's about 5 feet on average higher than the road. Both roads will be at the same level. So we really will not have a problem then. However, well, we don't have a choice because of the sea level there. Now, I understand the challenge that the senator has, and I give the assurance that the integrity of the road has not been compromised. What we have on the road, we have some surface damage. Now, this road was built in the 1950s. It was refurbished in 1980 to 1984, and in 1990, some significant work went in. From 1990 to now, no significant work have gone on that part of the roadway. In 2017, Madam President, just about a month ago, the AECOM, the senior engineers of AECOM, had a thorough walk along the roadway of the creek. And they confirmed that there were no deficiencies on the road. What they found is the surface cracks and a lot of potholes on the road. This has been caused by the amount of rainfall. If you know, and for the little that I've known so far about road paving, is that water damages the road. And once there are cracks in the road and water gets in, that's where we have the big deterioration on the road. There was also a challenge with the drainage on the Mosquito Creek, a lack of maintenance. And what we have there is that the water on the road has to go into the drains. These drains have not been maintained for a while. And there was a big delay in water settling on the road and continuing to further damage the road. NITCO have completed the restoration of all the drains. They have put in additional pumps. And they have also done the estimate for the repaving of the entire creek. Now, it is money that we really don't want to spend right now, because that highway is supposed to be completed, that phase of the highway is supposed to be completed within 18 months. However, we cannot leave the road as it is, because it is a danger. It is a danger, and I am sure that might be the cause of some of the accidents that we are seeing there, because if you try to dodge from one pothole to the next, this could be the cause. I have been given the assurance by NITCO, they have already done the estimates, and the drainage part of the work have been completed. Now it's for the surface patching, and in some areas, remilling the road and repaving it. So that will be done. But I can give you the assurance that there is no structural damage to the roadway. So, Madam President, having said that, I hope I can satisfy the Senator with her answers.
Honourable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, the 5th of December, 2017 at 1:30 p.m. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. This Senate now stands adjourned to Tuesday, the 5th of December, 2017 at 1:30 p.m.